The church was packed for my father's funeral. Daniel Carter had been a pillar of the community, building Carter Enterprises from a small residential contractor to the largest commercial developer in 3 states. Everyone who mattered was there. Business associates, politicians, family, friends, all paying their respects to a man who had built an empire worth over $75 million from nothing. I stood quietly near the casket, accepting condolences with my sister, Emily. We had both dropped everything to come home when Dad had his heart attack, but we'd arrived too late to say goodbye. Emily had flown in from her surgical residency in Boston, while I'd left my architectural firm in New York. We'd always been close, united by our shared grief after Mom died when we were teenagers and now at the loss of our father. "How are you holding up, Sarah?" Emily whispered as another group of mourners moved past. "I'm managing," I replied, though the truth was I felt numb. Dad and I had always been close. As the daughter who followed him into the construction industry, albeit as an architect rather than a developer, we shared a special bond. Emily squeezed my hand as our cousin Andrew approached, his wife, Claire, at his side. Andrew was Uncle Richard's son, and he'd been working at Carter Enterprises since college. While Emily and I had pursued our own paths, Andrew had positioned himself as Dad's right hand and apparent successor. Sarah, Emily, Andrew embraced us with practiced sympathy. "Your father was like a second father to me. This is devastating for all of us." There was something performative about his grief that set my teeth on edge, but I pushed the feeling aside. This wasn't the time. "Thank you for handling the arrangements," I said. Dad had suffered his heart attack at the office, and Andrew had taken charge of everything while Emily and I were traveling home. "Of course," Andrew nodded solemnly. Daniel would have expected nothing less. In fact, he'd been preparing me to take over more responsibilities. We'd been discussing my eventually taking the CEO position. I blinked in surprise. This was the first I'd heard of any succession plan favoring Andrew. Dad had always been tight-lipped about his business decisions, but this seemed like something he would have mentioned. "I'm sure we'll all have time to discuss the company after we've had a chance to grieve," Emily interjected smoothly, ever the diplomat. Andrew's expression hardened slightly. "Actually, there are some matters that can't wait. I've scheduled a family meeting at the house after the reception. The lawyers will be there." After the burial, mourners gathered at my father's sprawling Victorian home on Lakeview Drive. The house where Emily and I had grown up was now filled with visitors eating catered food and sharing stories about Dad. I moved through the rooms in a daze, accepting condolences and trying to process that he was really gone. "Sarah," a familiar voice pulled me from my thoughts. I turned to see David Miller, Dad's longtime friend and the architect who had first inspired my career choice. "David, thank you for coming." We embraced, and I felt tears threatening again. David had been a fixture in our lives, almost family. "Daniel was so proud of you," he said, his voice gentle. "He told everyone about your New York firm and the awards you've won." I smiled through my tears. We were working on a project together, actually, a community center downtown. Dad was providing the land and financing, and I was designing it. David looked surprised. I hadn't heard about that. We were keeping it quiet until the plans were finalized. Dad wanted it to be his legacy project: affordable housing, community spaces, a medical clinic. We were going to break ground next spring. Before David could respond, Andrew appeared, announcing that the family meeting would begin in Dad's study. I excused myself and made my way through the house, finding Emily already seated in one of the leather chairs facing Dad's massive oak desk. Andrew had positioned himself in Dad's chair, with Claire standing beside him. 2 men in suits, lawyers presumably, stood nearby. "Now that we're all here," Andrew began once I'd taken a seat, "we can address some urgent matters. As you know, Daniel was the sole owner of Carter Enterprises and all its subsidiaries. With his unexpected passing, there are decisions that need to be made immediately to ensure business continuity." One of the lawyers stepped forward. "I'm Thomas Harris, corporate counsel for Carter Enterprises. In the absence of a formally executed will—" "Wait," I interrupted. "What do you mean, absence of a will?" Dad definitely had a will. He updated it every few years. Andrew cleared his throat. "Unfortunately, there was an accident last week. Daniel had his estate documents out for review, and there was a fire in the fireplace. A draft caught some papers. The will was destroyed." I stared at him in disbelief. And there were no copies with the lawyers or anywhere else. Your father preferred to keep his personal affairs private, Harris explained. He kept the original in his home safe. We were scheduled to review it this coming week, but Emily leaned forward. This doesn't make sense. Dad was meticulous about everything, especially legal matters. Grief can be disorienting, Andrew said with practiced sympathy. The important thing now is to establish interim leadership for the company. As the senior executive and Daniel's closest male relative, I'm prepared to step in as acting CEO until more permanent arrangements can be made. The second lawyer distributed folders. We've prepared these interim management agreements. Essentially, they authorize Andrew to manage all Carter family assets and business interests while the estate is settled. Without a will, this process could take some time. I opened the folder and skimmed the document, my suspicion growing with every paragraph. The agreement would effectively give Andrew complete control over Dad's entire estate, the company, properties, investments, everything. And if we don't sign? Emily asked, always direct. Andrew's smile tightened. Without clear authority, the company could face operational paralysis. Projects would stall, contracts could be jeopardized, and the value of the estate, your inheritance, could be significantly diminished. I closed the folder. We need time to review this with our own lawyers. Of course, Andrew nodded magnanimously, but I should mention that there are several major deals in progress that require immediate attention. Any delay could be costly. We'll have our answer tomorrow, I said firmly. For now, I think we've had enough business talk for a funeral day. As the meeting broke up, I caught Harris giving Andrew a subtle nod. Something wasn't right, and I needed to find out what before signing anything. That evening, after most of the mourners had left, Emily and I sat in the kitchen of our childhood home, trying to make sense of the day's events. There's no way Dad's will just happen to burn up right before he died, Emily said, expressing exactly what I'd been thinking. And there's no way he didn't have copies, I added. Andrew is lying. Emily rubbed her temples. But why? Dad treated Andrew like a son. He was already going to inherit something substantial. I thought about Andrew's ambition, how he'd always wanted to be seen as Dad's successor. Maybe substantial wasn't enough. Maybe he wanted everything. Everything. What do? We can't prove anything, and without the will. I stood up suddenly, remembering something important. Dad took me to his bank last month. He showed me his safe deposit box and made sure I knew how to access it. He said it was just in case. Emily's eyes widened. Do you think? I don't know, but it's worth checking. The bank opens at 9 o'clock tomorrow. The next morning, we'd arrived at First National Bank as soon as it opened. The manager, recognizing us as Daniel Carter's daughters, expressed his condolences before escorting us to the vault area. Your father was one of our most valued clients, he explained as he located the correct box. He maintained several accounts and the safe deposit box for over 30 years. He used his key, and I used the key Dad had given me. The box slid out, and my heart raced as the manager discreetly left us alone with its contents. Inside were several sealed envelopes, a USB drive, and a leather portfolio. The large envelope was labeled Last Will and Testament, copy. I knew what Emily whispered as I opened the envelope. The will was comprehensive and crystal clear. Dad had left 30% of Carter Enterprises to me, 30% to Emily, 20% to Andrew, and 10% to a charitable foundation he'd established in Mom's name. He named me as CEO, citing my architectural vision and business acumen, with provisions for Emily to remain on the board despite her medical career. But that wasn't all. The leather portfolio contained detailed plans for the community center project I'd mentioned to David, complete with funding allocations, land deeds, and architectural renderings I created. Dad had already transferred the downtown property and $25 million in development funds to a separate LLC that was jointly owned by him and me. The USB drive contained years of company records, including evidence that Andrew had been systematically diverting company resources to side projects that benefited him personally, not enough to be immediately noticeable, but substantial over time. He didn't just want to control the company, I realized aloud. He needed to cover up what he'd been doing. Emily squeezed my hand. What's our next move? I thought of Andrew sitting in Dad's chair, so confident in his scheme. We go to the meeting he's arranged and bring some guests of our own. That afternoon, Andrew greeted us with barely concealed impatience as we entered Dad's study. He had the signed management agreements laid out on the desk, pens at the ready. "Have you made your decision?" he asked. "As I mentioned, we have pressing matters requiring immediate attention." "We have," I replied calmly. "But before we sign anything, we'd like to introduce some people." On cue, the study door opened. David Miller entered, followed by an elegant older woman I knew was Dad's personal attorney, Margaret Hayes. Behind them came two members of the Carter Enterprises Board of Directors. Andrew's expression flickered between confusion and alarm. "What is this?" "This," I said, placing Dad's will on the desk, "is a copy of our father's actual will. The one you knew existed because he reviewed it with all his senior executives last year." Color draining from Andrew's face. "Where did you?" "Dad kept copies in his safe deposit box," Emily explained, "along with some very interesting company records." Margaret Hayes stepped forward. "As Daniel Carter's personal attorney, I can confirm this is his most recent will, properly executed and witnessed. I hold the official copy in my firm's records." Andrew's corporate lawyer, Harris, looked stunned. "I was told there was no will, that everything had been destroyed in an accident." "There was no accident," I said, my voice steady despite my anger. "Andrew lied to you, to us, and planned to seize control of everything our father built." "These are serious accusations," Andrew blustered, but his confidence was visibly crumbling. "I was only trying to ensure business continuity during a difficult time. By presenting false documents and attempting to defraud the rightful heirs." Margaret asked sharply. "That's not continuity, that's criminal." One of the board members, Janet Foster, spoke up. "The board will need to address this immediately. Andrew's actions represent a serious breach of fiduciary duty." Andrew looked desperately around the room, finding no allies. "This is a misunderstanding. I was only acting in the family's best interests." "And the funds you diverted to Pinnacle Ventures?" I asked, referencing information from the USB drive. "Was that in the family's best interest too?" His face went completely white. "How did you?" "Dad knew," Emily said quietly. "He was gathering evidence. That's probably why he made sure we could access the safe deposit box." For the next hour, the true extent of Andrew's betrayal unfolded. He'd not only planned to hijack the entire company but had been embezzling funds for years. Dad had suspected but had been gathering concrete proof before confronting him. As the meeting concluded, Andrew and Claire were escorted from the property by security. The board members called an emergency session, and Margaret began the formal process of executing Dad's will. Left alone in the study with Emily, I finally let my guard down. I can't believe he would do this. Dad trusted him. Emily put her arm around me. Dad also protected against it. He made sure we had what we needed to expose the truth. I nodded, glancing around the study that held so many memories. My eyes fell on the architectural plans for the community center, Dad's legacy project, now my responsibility to complete. "What will you do about the CEO position?" Emily asked. "Dad named you in the will, but you have your own firm in New York." I traced my fingers over the community center designs. "I think it's time to come home. Dad built something important here. He trusted me to carry it forward." 1 month later, I stood on the vacant downtown lot where the Carter Community Center would soon rise. Construction equipment was already in place for the groundbreaking ceremony scheduled for the following day. The project had expanded to include not just affordable housing and a medical clinic, but also an educational center for construction and architectural training for underprivileged youth. Andrew had been removed from the company and was facing criminal charges for embezzlement. He and Claire had left town, their carefully crafted social standing in ruins. Emily had returned to Boston but planned to split her time between her medical career and her board responsibilities. We discovered that Dad had been quietly funding a medical research initiative in Mom's name at Emily's hospital, another piece of his legacy neither of us had known about. As the sun began to set over the city skyline, I felt a sense of peace washing over me. Dad had prepared us better than we'd ever known, not just with assets and legal protections, but with the values and skills to continue what he'd started. "We're ready for tomorrow's ceremony, Miss Carter," my project manager called from across the lot. "Thank you, Mark," I replied, taking one last look at the empty space that would soon transform into Dad's final gift to the community. In my pocket was the key to Dad's safe deposit box. A reminder that sometimes the most important inheritances aren't just what's visible to others, but the foresight, wisdom, and love that remain long after someone is gone. Andrew had been so focused on controlling the company that he completely missed the true wealth Dad had built, not just in assets, but in relationships, respect, and vision for the future. While my cousin had schemed for what he could take, Dad had been quietly planning what he could give. Standing there on the threshold of that future, I silently thanked my father for his final lesson. True legacy isn't measured in dollars or property deeds, but in the positive change we create and the wisdom we pass on. Andrew had tried to steal an inheritance, but he could never touch the real wealth Dad had left us, the opportunity to continue making a difference in the world he loved.
Everyone is gathered already. Bring out the car. Okay, I'll move to the driver's seat. Just wait a moment. We had just reached the cottage when a powerful earthquake struck as we exited the car. I immediately lay down flat on the road, hoping the shaking would stop soon. However, that's when I was seemingly cast into hell. My mother-in-law and sister-in-law Stacy left me behind and drove away in the car. This trip, labeled a test, was supposed to be my first one with them after dealing with their constant bullying. Hoping to finally be seen as a family. I just couldn't believe how mean they could be to someone who's supposed to be family. An unbearable anger began to seethe within me. My husband Nick, who was supposed to join us later due to work, was shocked to find me abandoned on the road. After learning the truth, fueled by anger, Nick and I returned to his parents' house in another state. There, we shared various stories with my parents and decided to bring divine retribution upon my mother-in-law and Stacy. My name is Hillary Anderson. I am 28 years old and work in the accounting department of a moderately sized company. I am notoriously error-prone, with my documents frequently containing mistakes, and my boss scolds me every time. Despite my resolutions to improve, I always end up making errors. My blunders soured the department's atmosphere, leading to colleagues blaming me behind my back, saying, "It's Hillary's fault again." I was thinking about giving up my job because I was feeling really down. When this guy named Nick showed up, he's 2 years older than me, and got hired a bit later in his career. He seemed reliable at first glance and indeed was, quickly becoming the ace of our department with his excellent efficiency, while I continued to make mistakes. One day, when no other colleagues were around, presumably out of consideration, Nick approached me. "You're always getting scolded, are you okay? Everyone's been talking behind your back, and I've been concerned." Surprised, I shared my struggles as best I could. Since my first day, I was told to learn by observing, but my seniors finished their tasks too quickly for me to catch on, leading to my frequent mistakes. "I see. That's pretty harsh. Leave it to me, then," he said and quickly went somewhere, leaving me feeling like I was left in the dust. When I returned to my senses and went back to my department, my colleagues started whispering as they saw me. "It's always tough," but Nick loudly intervened. "Stop whispering about others like grade schoolers. From now on, I'll teach the work. And you'll probably stop making mistakes, right?" My boss, taken aback by the sudden declaration, respected Nick and said, "If you say so." And so, I started working under Nick. Although surprised by the turn of events, I gradually improved and eventually, no one criticized me anymore. Nick and I grew closer while working together, and I felt he was the only one I could ever marry. 3 months after he joined the company, I confessed, and we started dating. After a year of dating, I bravely proposed in reverse, thinking, I can't believe I could do something like this. Nick laughed and accepted, confirming our fate together. When we visited his parents to announce our engagement, they complained, "Are you sure about marrying such a timid girl?" But Nick firmly stated, "If you don't approve of this marriage, I'll cut ties with you." Now, we are happily living together as a couple. My parents had always worried whether I could ever marry, but my dad was delighted, saying, "Marrying a good man like Nick, well done." My mom smiled broadly, repeatedly nodding, "Now I'm relieved." Their happiness meant the world to me. After marrying Nick, I became a housewife. Nick had said, "It's okay, if you want to work." But I wanted to support him fully, so I had no hesitation in quitting. However, our peaceful life together ended in just 3 months. Nick's dad passed away from a stroke, and right after, Stacy's company went bankrupt. My in-laws were broke and desperately asked Nick for some help since they had nothing left. When Nick broached the topic of living together, I honestly hated the idea. During our marriage introductions, they clearly looked down on me. And I never felt Stacy harbored any good feelings towards me. But since Nick had stood up for me during our marriage, seeing his saddened face, I resolved to live together. We thought we would move into my in-laws' house, but with no income. They sold their home for a pittance and started living with us. Right from the start of our cohabitation, my mother-in-law said to me, "Hillary, please take care of things. And by the way, I'll be testing you to see if you're a suitable match for Nick in various aspects, including household chores." Taken aback, I was speechless, but Stacy smirked and continued, "Well, of course. We need to check if you're compatible with our family." To be honest, the very mention of this test at that moment made me believe compatibility was impossible. And it turned out just as I feared, not really a test. All household chores were dumped on me, and any slight dissatisfaction from them led to, "Hillary, what on earth are you doing? Why don't you do it more efficiently? Can't you even clean properly? What kind of upbringing did you have?" They constantly threw their dissatisfaction at me, with Stacy nastily continuing, "You're kind of pathetic, aren't you? Why don't you just go back to kindergarten? Look, there's dust over there. I have asthma, you know. If it's not clean, I'll start coughing, so make sure you get it right." If they were going to complain so much, they should do the cleaning themselves. I screamed inside my head. But I'm not the type to say such things directly. "I'm sorry," I said and vacuumed again. They watched intently, as if monitoring me. While I was cleaning, the two of them kept whispering and muttering under their breath. It was clear they were talking badly about me. Even when I was folding laundry, oh dear, what a terrible way to fold. "If you do it like that, it's going to wrinkle. I really have to refold it myself," my mother-in-law said, as she forcefully pushed me aside and started folding the laundry herself. However, her method looked just the same as mine. Yet, she looked satisfied with the folded laundry and said, "I showed you the proper way. You better remember how it's done next time." After saying this, my mother-in-law strutted off somewhere. I sighed deeply and stored the laundry in the dresser. The complaints about meals were harsh too. "Hey, I hate vegetables. If they're all mixed up like this, I can't eat it. Sorry, but can you make it again?" Stacy said in a haughty tone. "It's not tasty to begin with. Frankly, it's awful. You should buy a cookbook and start learning from the basics," my mother-in-law chimed in. Together, they kept on giving me a hard time. Nick often came home late from work, and we rarely ate together. When he was around, they behaved, but otherwise, it was a parade of insults. I never truly believed in this test, but I tried my best to get their approval. However, no matter how hard I tried, my mother-in-law and Stacy's attitudes never changed. In fact, they became increasingly arrogant and dismissive. I tried to act cheerful so Nick wouldn't find out, but it seems I couldn't hide it completely. "Are Mom and Stacy doing something to you? You've been clearly down lately. If they're being cruel to you, please tell me. I'll make them stop." Nick's kind words unexpectedly brought me to tears. I managed to tell him, in between sobs, how I'd been mercilessly tormented by my mother-in-law and Stacy under the guise of us test. "They've never shown me any sign of this. What kind of a test is this? It sounds like mere bullying. Just wait here." Nick looked furious and was about to leave the room, but I calmed him down and decided to express my feelings. "It's definitely tough, but I feel like if I can get through this hardship, they might finally accept me. I'll try a little longer." Nick wore a complicated look, but after a little while, he gently shared his thoughts. "If that's what you want, Hillary, I'll keep watching for a while. But if it ever becomes too much, you must tell me right away, okay? I'm always on your side. Hearing this was enough for me. Though I doubted the sincerity of the test, I did my best. However, my mother-in-law and Stacy continued their harsh treatment. Yet, this adversity sparked a defiant spirit in me, and I managed to persevere. Through the terrible days, I was nothing more than a maid, a lackey for them, mindlessly fulfilling their demands. When I felt I couldn't take it anymore, my mother-in-law said, "It seems you do have some guts after all. All right, you passed the test." Her sudden declaration felt surreal, and as I stood there stunned, she continued, "Actually, it's a family tradition to go on a trip every summer. You should come with us, Hillary. Let's deepen our bond there." I couldn't believe what I was hearing and looked at Stacy, who nodded as if to confirm she's accepted. That night, I happily shared the news with Nick. He sighed deeply and, though frustrated with their behavior, his face showed relief. If this makes Hillary happy, I have no complaints. But I'm still worried if they really mean it. Anyway, let's enjoy the trip. Afterward, the way my mother-in-law and Stacy treated me changed dramatically. No more complaints about cleaning, no criticisms of how I folded laundry. And they even enjoyed the meals, saying, "Delicious." I truly felt accepted as family. When the day of the trip arrived, Nick had a sudden meeting and would join us later. Stacy, my mother-in-law, and I were in the same car, heading to the cottage. "Hillary, you've worked hard, so relax on this trip. It's a green area, perfect for a change of scenery. I never thought you'd pass the test, Hillary. You've really done well. Let's get along as a family from now on." Their words moved me, though I couldn't trust them fully yet. I hoped to gradually build a good relationship. We were driving towards our destination, guided by the car's GPS, watching the scenery become greener. Then, an incredibly stylish cottage came into view, where we planned to stay. As soon as I got out of the car, there was a heavy thud. And then the ground shook so violently that I struggled to stay on my feet. I had to cling to the road to avoid being swept off. I've been through earthquakes before, but this one was totally out of the ordinary. The shaking lasted only a few minutes, but it felt eternal. Once the earthquake subsided, I was frozen in fear, unable to move from the spot on the road. Then I heard what I thought was a hallucination. A conversation that couldn't be real. "Stacy, the family's all here. Start the car." "Okay, I'm moving to the driver's seat." "Just wait." I was flat on the ground, frozen by what I just heard. Without a glance at me, Stacy moved from the passenger to the driver's seat, closed the door, and, unbelievably, started the car and drove away. Dumbfounded, I watched the car disappear into the distance. After several aftershocks, none as severe as the first, I remained on the road, unable to think. Frozen in the same position. Eventually, realizing the danger of staying on the road, I stood up and surveyed the surroundings. Some cottages were partially destroyed, a testament to the earthquake's ferocity. I moved to the side of the road and stopped to reflect on what my mother-in-law and Stacy had said before the trip about passing the test and becoming family. All those statements were lies, otherwise, they wouldn't have abandoned me like this. They must have been planning to catch me off guard, with sweet words only to betray me later. No other explanation made sense. And for the first time in my life, I felt a rage I had never known before. Who wouldn't feel humiliated after such treatment? Then I heard a car horn and saw that it was Nick's car. He parked beside me, rushed out, and firmly grabbed my shoulders. "Thank goodness you're safe. Are you hurt? Why are you standing here alone? Where are my mom and Stacy? Are they safe?" Nick was clearly agitated, repeatedly asking if I was okay. Once he saw I was uninjured, he calmed down slightly and started discussing the current situation. I tried calling several times, but I guess everyone's trying to reach their loved ones. I couldn't get through to my mom or Stacy either. Nick was obviously worried about his mom and Stacy, but I needed to make clear the extent of their cruel actions. Noticing a change in my expression, he asked with concern. What's wrong? I spoke clearly and directly about what had happened. How I was left alone on the road after the earthquake, and how they drove off without me. As I spoke, I became emotional, my voice faltering at times, but I managed to say, I can never forgive those two, with more resolution than I had ever felt before. Hearing my story, Nick let out a cry of anguish. His eyes were bloodshot. And his face showed an anger I had never seen before. They left you in a situation like this? When your life could have been in danger. They've crossed a line that should never be crossed by anyone. I agree. They've gone too far. I intend to make them face the consequences. You won't stop me, will you? Nick placed his hand on my shoulder as if it were a matter of course. Of course, they'll face their punishment. But first, we need to decide what to do next. It's unsafe to enter the buildings. Let's go to my parents' house then. I don't know what the earthquake damage is like. But I'm really worried about my parents. I tried calling my dad, but I couldn't get through. I couldn't reach my mother-in-law. Or Stacy either. After exchanging looks with Nick, we got into the car. And headed to my parents' house. Fortunately, my parents' house was unaffected by the earthquake, just a little shaken, according to my dad. I was really anxious. I never thought an 8.0 earthquake could hit your area. It's really good that you're safe too, Nick. Are your mom and sister okay? Nick paused before responding to my dad. It seemed fine when the earthquake happened. We still can't get through on the phone. So I'm not sure if they're safe now. But they're both pretty lucky, so I'm sure they're fine. My mom and I turned on the TV and watched the earthquake news. Despite the high magnitude, the damage didn't seem as extensive as one might expect. Fewer people were injured than anticipated. Of course, more details about the earthquake might reveal more victims later. Still, the newscaster was saying, it's good that the damage wasn't more severe. There were still some aftershocks, but none with a high intensity. However, we were still on alert when Nick's smartphone rang. He gave me eye contact. So it was clear it was either my mother-in-law or Stacy. For a while, Nick responded in a very blunt tone, yes, he's safe, and so on. My parents looked at me, wondering what was wrong, and then suddenly Nick shouted. Don't joke with me. Why did you leave Hillary behind? Were you panicked because of the earthquake? Do you think that's an excuse? You said the family was all together before driving off. Nick is usually calm, but he can be very direct when he needs to be. Like when we met for our marriage introduction. If you can't come back because of a roadblock, you could have stayed in the car overnight. Where are we? It doesn't matter to you. I don't want to talk for a while. Bye. With that, Nick ended the call abruptly. A heavy, gloomy atmosphere lingered in the room. My unknowing parents must have been wondering what was going on. I felt it was my place to explain. I asked my parents to sit down on the living room sofa. Nick looked at me, and I nodded deeply once to assure him, it's okay. Then I began to tell them about the life I had been leading since moving in. With my mother-in-law and Stacy, and how they had left me behind right after. Making me feel like family during the earthquake. I see. It's clear now how much you've been mistreated. Those people have no right to take away someone's dignity, my dad whispered. You've endured a lot, Hillary. You're not the type to speak up against people. But I wish you had consulted us. We could have helped, my mom said. Her brow furrowed with concern. Having you as parents is truly a treasure, I thought. Feeling even more grateful that they were my parents. I'm sorry. Hillary did consult with me. She said she wanted to try a bit harder. So I was just observing. This is partly my responsibility, Nick admitted. I immediately countered Nick's words, saying it was my decision to keep trying. So, I have something to consult with Dad, is that okay? After settling down, I broached a new topic with my dad. I'll do anything I can help with. Is this about Nick's mom and sister? Yes, of course. It's unthinkable to leave those two unchallenged. Can you help? Of course, my dad replied, and I shared my planned idea. If we went through with it, my mother-in-law and Stacy would be absolutely shocked. After I finished explaining, Nick stood up with vigor. They'll be surprised for sure. I'd love to see their panicked faces in person. But that depends on getting your help. I'm definitely helping. My daughter has been put through so much. We need to make those two pay, my dad declared. My mom nodded slowly, repeatedly indicating her complete agreement with my dad. So, everything's settled then. Let's go to bed for today. I'm really tired. That's how the day ended. Nick's company building was undamaged. But the inside was a mess, so he would be off work for a few days. We kept the TV on, constantly watching for earthquake updates. Thankfully, the damage wasn't too severe, which was a relief. 3 days after the earthquake, my mother-in-law called. I thought, here it comes, and waited about a minute before answering. What? Why didn't you answer right away? It's an emergency over here. My mother-in-law was panicking, and her predictable reaction almost made me chuckle. What's wrong? The earthquake has settled down, hasn't it? There's no need to panic, is there? I thought my pretend cluelessness was funny and couldn't help but chuckle. Huh? Did you just laugh? Listen carefully because you're going to be shocked. When you hear this, somehow our house has been cordoned off. And the workers keep saying it's scheduled for demolition, do not enter, over and over. I responded in a clear, assertive tone, as if it were the most natural thing. I arranged that. If the earthquake compromised the structural integrity, it's dangerous to live there, right? So, I thought it would be better to demolish it. My mother-in-law was so stunned by my response that she fell completely silent. Apparently at a loss for words. Realizing that they no longer had a place to live might have terrified her into silence. Unable to contain herself, Stacy chimed in, apparently on speakerphone. Are you insane? It's one thing if you checked and found structural issues. But to demolish it without checking. My mother-in-law was clearly shocked, but Stacy's panic was palpable. And I naturally retorted with a laugh, the crazy one is you. What? Are you really trying to defy me? Don't underestimate me. But I can't deal with you right now. Stop the demolition immediately. After a moment of silence from my mother-in-law, Stacy's words seemed to spur her back into speech. Just as Stacy said. How dare you defy us? Should we remind you of all the things we've done to you? It's baffling from where they think they can intimidate me at this point. Your ranting is hurting my ears, so may I hang up now? Excuse me. As I moved to end the call, where are you right now, came from the other end. But I ignored it and hung up. Was that from Mom and Stacy? Nick, who had been listening, spoke up with a serious look. Yeah. They seemed pretty panicked. It was such a new experience for them that I couldn't help but laugh. Hearing this, Nick also grinned with amusement. That makes sense. They have no place to live and no money. No wonder they're panicked. They'll probably realize we're here soon enough. I'm looking forward to it. Nick seemed to be imagining his mom and Stacy's frantic state, muttering. This isn't over yet. Both my parents and Nick and I were certain that they would come here since they had nowhere else to go. So, we relaxed and waited for them to arrive. Almost excited for them to show up sooner. At least I was. Eagerly awaiting the day I could shatter their last refuge. Then, the day of confrontation arrived. It was 2 days after the call from my mother-in-law. The doorbell rang, and when I checked the camera, they looked as if they hadn't bathed. In filthy clothes. They probably hadn't bathed since they didn't have the money. I watched them through the camera without opening the door until they started banging on the door. Concerned about disturbing the neighbors, I finally opened it. So you were here after all. While we struggled to find a place to sleep. You must have been sleeping in a fluffy bed. Our house is probably completely leveled now. It was Nick's house, yet you had it demolished on your instructions. Nick must be here, right? Make this woman pay for demolishing the house. My mother-in-law threw these accusations at me like she was venting all her pent-up frustration. Stacy stood slightly behind her, glaring at me with narrowed eyes. Then, as if he had been waiting for this, Nick came over to my side. Did you two take a bath? I guess not, no place to rely on, huh? Nick spoke in a disdainfully condescending tone as if looking at something filthy. Nick. You know the house was demolished? This woman ordered it. And now your house is gone. Why aren't you mad? Losing a house is a big deal. Nick sighed deeply and shook his head several times. Then, he dropped a bombshell that shocked both my mother-in-law and Stacy. What are you talking about? That house isn't mine. It's Hillary's house. So, of course, it gets demolished if Hillary says so. The look on their faces when Nick revealed this fact was so priceless. I wished I had taken a photo. They looked utterly dumbfounded. Huh? What? It's not the house you built? My mother-in-law was visibly confused and in disarray. Stacy was also in disbelief, her mouth agape. When I married Hillary, her dad, being the generous CEO of a construction company, gifted us the house as a wedding present. Really generous, right? That's just how he is. My mother-in-law stuttered for a while before saying in a misplaced voice. You never told us that. Why would I? If I told you, you'd just try to take advantage. Even I can see that. I thought we could get along since Hillary called you family. It was my mistake to expect anything from you. You probably just wanted to lift her up. And then bring her down for fun, right? It's over for both of you. After hearing Nick's harsh comments, my mother-in-law and Stacy were totally at a loss for words. Then, as if delivering the final blow, my dad came in. Well, what have you done here? Haven't seen you since the wedding. You come here after treating my daughter terribly, and with what face? Can you disappear from our sight right now? Otherwise, I'll expose all the awful things you've done to her to the public. After saying this coldly, my dad took my smartphone and played the audio recordings I had made. I had recorded the terrible things they said every day, just in case. I thought about deleting them when they said we were family. But I never did because I never truly trusted them. My mother-in-law and Stacy turned pale instantly, then slowly backed away and finally ran off. After they ran away, we high-fived and shared our joy. So, here's what happened to my mother-in-law and Stacy after they left our house. They just kept driving around without a clue until their car ran out of gas. Unable to afford a tow truck, they started walking along the road. Walking in the summer heat without water, they soon suffered from dehydration. Eventually, both of them ended up in the hospital with heat stroke. After recovering, they faced another problem: they couldn't pay their medical bills and ended up at a social service office. Embarrassed by their situation, they fled from there and ended up homeless. It seems they now spend their days in a park where other homeless people gather, fighting over any food they find. It's a fitting outcome for their actions. And without seeking help from public institutions, it's unlikely they'll escape homelessness. Summer might be tolerable, but winter will be harder, especially for my mother-in-law. But at this point, I don't need to worry about her anymore. They can live selfishly as they choose. Now, that's all I think about them. Enough about my mother-in-law and Stacy. I'd like to finish by talking about our current situation. We're currently building a new house on the cleared land. Nick and I kept telling my dad that he didn't need to go to such lengths. But he insisted, declaring, "I'm going to build your house." And we eventually relented. It's a generous offer, indeed. We also needed a place to live until the new house is completed. So, we rented a monthly apartment close to Nick's company, where we are now living happily. Although I hesitated at first, just thinking about the new house that awaits us lifts my spirits. Just imagining living there alone with my beloved Nick makes me smile uncontrollably. Nick and I are getting along very well, and we're excitedly planning a trip soon. We're counting down the days until we can go on a fun adventure that will erase the memories of our last bad trip. We're sure this future trip will completely overshadow all the challenges we've dealt with. How could you be so selfish? My father shouted, his face turning red as he paced back and forth frantically in the spacious living room of their lakefront vacation home. The evening sunlight glinted off Bear Lake through the floor-to-ceiling windows, creating a stark contrast to the tension in the room. Natalie needs that money for her new business venture. You make 7 figures, Eliza. You have more than enough. I stood frozen in place, a knot forming in my stomach, my fingers still clutching the property tax bill that had sparked this ambush. What should have been a relaxing Sunday dinner with mountain views had transformed, without warning, into an inquisition about why I wasn't financially supporting the family anymore. My name is Eliza Parker, and at 33, I've built a successful career as a day trader. I wasn't handed anything on a silver platter. Every dollar in my accounts I've earned through endless nights analyzing market patterns, learning from brutal losses in futures trading, and making calculated risks that paid off. For the past 5 years, I've been silently covering the property taxes on my parents' luxury vacation home, making my younger sister Natalie's car payments when she couldn't afford them, and financing lavish family vacations without a single complaint. It was my way of giving back to the family that raised me, of proving my worth to them. Or so I foolishly believed. Dad, I've been paying for everything for years, I finally managed, my voice steadier than the thundering of my heart would suggest. The property taxes, Natalie's so-called business trips, Mom's medical bills that insurance didn't cover. I've never once asked for anything in return. But I can't keep bankrolling everyone forever. I have my own future to think about. My mother, Diana, sat rigidly on the plush leather couch, her eyes fixed on her perfectly manicured hands folded in her lap. She wouldn't meet my gaze. And that silent rejection stabbed deeper than my father's angry words ever could. We gave you everything growing up, Dad continued, dismissing my words entirely, as he ran his hand through his salt and pepper hair. And now that we actually need you, you're abandoning us while your sister is finally trying to make something of herself. After everything we've done for you. That's when I noticed the envelope on the glass coffee table, partially concealed under an issue of Architectural Digest. The corner of an official-looking document peeked out, and I could make out the words Trust Fund and Natalie Parker in bold, embossed lettering. My stomach twisted into a painful knot. I lunged for the envelope before my father could intercept me. Eliza, that's private family business, he snapped, reaching for it too late. I was already scanning the document, my hands visibly shaking, as the truth revealed itself in cold, legal language. My father, Victor Parker, retired bank manager, had established a substantial trust fund for Natalie. Only Natalie. The same father who had told me repeatedly there wasn't enough money to help with my college tuition, forcing me to juggle several campus jobs while keeping my GPA to keep my scholarship. The same father who now expected me to fund their lakefront lifestyle while secretly setting my sister up for life. When exactly were you planning to tell me about this? I whispered, a cold clarity washing over me like the winter winds off the lake. My entire life suddenly crystallized into perfect, painful focus, the blatant favoritism, the wildly different expectations, the constant demands disguised as family duty. At that moment, I knew everything was about to change forever. My father snatched the trust fund document from my trembling hands. But the damage was done. The numbers burned into my memory, $350,000 set aside for Natalie, with additional provisions for future contributions. All while I'd been told countless times that family finances were stretched thin. You weren't supposed to see that, he muttered, hastily folding the paper and stuffing it back into the envelope, his ears turning red with anger. Or embarrassment, I couldn't tell which. Clearly, I replied, my voice hollow with shock. I guess that explains why you watch me drown in student loans without lifting a finger to help. Growing up, the pattern had always been there, etched into every childhood memory like an unshakable shadow. Natalie got expensive dance lessons and cheerleading camps, while I was coldly told to focus on academics. She received a brand new Audi. For her 16th birthday, I took the public bus for 3 years until I saved enough from my grueling after-school job at the mall to buy a used Honda with 120,000 miles on it. When college decisions arrived, Natalie went to an exclusive private university with full family support while I cobbled together scholarships and worked 30 hours a week at a local coffee shop, often studying behind the counter during slow periods. I'd always rationalized it away, telling myself it was due to changing financial circumstances or evolving parenting philosophies as they've learned from raising me first. I desperately didn't want to believe what was now staring me in the face with brutal clarity. My parents simply valued Natalie more. The realization felt like a physical blow to my chest. "Sweetheart," my mother finally spoke, her voice carrying that gentle, placating tone I now recognized as pure manipulation. "Your sister needs more help than you do. She's always been more delicate. You've always been so independent, so capable. We're so proud of everything you've accomplished on your own. You're the strong one." The twisted logic made my head spin. I was being punished for my resilience and success while Natalie was rewarded for her deliberate helplessness and dependence. The unfairness of it burned through me like acid. "All those times I desperately needed help," I said slowly, memories flooding back with painful clarity. When I was juggling 2 campus jobs during finals week and barely sleeping 4 hours a night. When my car broke down in the middle of winter and I couldn't afford repairs. When I needed that security deposit for my first apartment after graduation and had to take a high-interest loan from a friend. You looked me in the eye and said you couldn't help, but the money was there all along. It was just reserved for Natalie. Dad shifted his weight uncomfortably, avoiding my gaze as he straightened his expensive watch. "Investment decisions aren't that simple, Eliza. We had to think strategically about the future." "Just not my future," I replied, the words hanging in the air, cold and sharp as ice. I thought about all the payments I'd made on their behalf over the years, each one draining my hard-earned savings. The property taxes on this vacation home alone were $8,700 annually. I'd covered them for 5 straight years without question, plus countless other family expenses. I'd even paid $12,000 for roof repairs last summer, without a single complaint, canceling my own planned trip to Europe to make it happen. All while they were secretly building a lavish nest egg for my sister. "The taxes are due next month," Dad said abruptly, changing the subject, as he slid the bill across the polished coffee table toward me. "And the Homeowners Association increased their fees again. Something about a new community dock." I stared at him, absolutely incredulous. After what I had just discovered, the years of lies and manipulation, he still expected me to pay? The sheer audacity was breathtaking. Something inside me shifted then, a fundamental recalibration of my entire worldview. I had been played for a fool for years, but that charade ended today. "I'll take care of it," I said quietly, picking up the bill, my voice giving nothing away. My father visibly relaxed, completely missing the steely resolve that had settled in my eyes. The drive back to my downtown Salt Lake City luxury condominium was a blur of emotion. The normally majestic snow-capped mountains that usually brought me peace now seemed to loom accusingly against the darkening purple sky. I gripped the steering wheel of my BMW until my knuckles turned white, fighting back tears of anger and betrayal. I had been such a blind, willing fool. Once safely behind the security doors of my high-rise building, I ignored my constantly ringing phone, undoubtedly my father making sure I wouldn't suddenly develop a backbone about the property tax bill, and pulled out my laptop. With trembling fingers that betrayed my outward calm, I opened a folder I'd meticulously maintained for years but never thought I would actually have to use: financial contributions, family. The detailed spreadsheet that appeared on screen represented tens of thousands of dollars I'd systematically poured into my family's needs and wants. 5 years of property tax payments, $43,500. Natalie's luxury car payments I'd taken over when she claimed she couldn't afford them. while posting Instagram photos from Cabo $11,680. The new cedar shake roof on the vacation home, $12,000. Medical expenses for my mother's knee surgery not covered by insurance, $8,200. Family vacations I'd funded under the guise of gifts, including that Alaskan cruise where I wasn't even invited, $22,400. The total made me physically ill, a wave of nausea washing over me, $118,830 over just 5 years. All while my parents secretly funneled money into an extravagant trust fund for my sister. I scrolled through the meticulous digital copies of checks, bank transfer receipts, and text messages from my family half-heartedly thanking me for my generosity. "You're a lifesaver, sis, and we couldn't do this without you, honey." Each message now felt like damning evidence of my own pathetic naivety. My phone pinged with a text from Natalie. "Dad says you're being difficult about the taxes. Don't be selfish, Eliza. Some of us don't make your kind of money." I laughed bitterly, the sound harsh in my silent apartment. Of course she would immediately take their side. Why wouldn't she? She had been the privileged beneficiary of their blatant favoritism her entire life. Another text followed, this one from my father. "We're counting on you for those taxes, Eliza. Don't let the family down. The payment needs to be made by Friday." No thank you, no acknowledgement of what I'd already contributed. Over the years, just the entitled expectation that I would continue to finance their luxury lifestyle while they covertly built my sister's future at my expense. The next morning, I called in sick to my home trading office and drove through light spring rain to see Marcus Bennett, the financial advisor, who had helped me build my investment portfolio after I started making serious money 3 years ago when I left the prop trading firm and decided to strike out on my own. "This is quite a detailed list," Marcus said, his normally pleasant expression darkening as he reviewed my spreadsheet of family contributions. His eyes widened noticeably at the total. "And you've never requested or expected repayment for any of this?" "Their family," I said simply, the words feeling hollow now. I wanted to help. I thought it was the right thing to do. Marcus removed his designer glasses and gave me an unusually serious look. "Eliza, your generosity is admirable, truly. But this level of financial support is completely unsustainable. You're actively sabotaging your own financial future while enabling unhealthy dependence. This arrangement isn't healthy for any of you, especially you." "I see that now," I said quietly, my voice barely audible over the gentle rain tapping against the office windows. "I just discovered they've created a substantial trust fund for my sister, while letting me shoulder all these family expenses." Marcus's expression hardened, a sudden flash of genuine anger crossing his normally composed features. "That fundamentally changes the situation. This isn't just poor boundaries, this is exploitation." For the next 2 hours, we methodically developed a comprehensive plan. I would need extensive documentation, notarized statements of all my contributions, formal receipts, and a complete accounting of everything I'd given. Marcus enthusiastically recommended his colleague, a forensic accountant named Dominic Rivera, who specialized in untangling complex financial disputes and family financial abuses. "Are you absolutely certain you want to go down this road?" Marcus asked as our strategy session concluded, his expression a mix of concern and quiet support. Family conflicts over money can get extraordinarily ugly very quickly. There's rarely any going back. I thought about the trust fund document, about years of being told there wasn't enough to help me while Natalie received everything her heart desired, about the property tax bill my father had pushed across the table, with that casual sense of entitlement that I would handle it without question. "I'm certain," I said, my voice stronger and more confident than it had been in days. "It's time they understood exactly what I've been contributing all these years, and what happens when that contribution abruptly stops." As I left Marcus's office, walking through the misty rain to my car, I felt something I hadn't experienced in years when it came to my family. A genuine sense of power and control over my own life. 1 week after discovering the trust fund, I sat in Dominic Rivera's immaculate downtown office, surrounded by neatly organized stacks of financial documents. The forensic accountant had been meticulously cataloging my financial contributions to the Parker family over the past 5 years with an attention to detail that impressed even me. "Your documentation is remarkably thorough," Dominic noted with professional admiration, sorting through bank statements and receipts with practiced efficiency. "Most people don't maintain records this detailed. Your trading background serves you well." My years in the markets had instilled disciplined record-keeping habits. Every transaction, every transfer, every expense, all meticulously tracked, categorized, and annotated with dates and purposes. "So what's the total damage?" I asked, steeling myself emotionally. For the answer, though I already knew it would be substantial. Dominic slid a professionally bound document across his polished desk. The final tally was even worse than my initial calculations, $133,745. The additional $14,915 comes from the opportunity cost, interest you've lost by diverting these substantial funds from your own investments, he explained, pointing to a detailed chart. "Based on your portfolio's documented performance over this period, that's actually a conservative estimate. It could easily be higher." I nodded slowly, feeling a strange mixture of vindication and deep grief. The numbers made the betrayal concrete, undeniable, impossible to rationalize away any longer. "What are my options now?" I asked, my voice steady despite the emotional turmoil. "That depends entirely on what outcome you want," Dominic replied candidly. "If you're seeking legal restitution, we could potentially build a case, though family financial matters can be complicated without written agreements. If you're simply documenting this for your own emotional closure, or as leverage in family discussions, we can prepare a comprehensive financial impact statement." "The second option," I said decisively. "For now." As Dominic prepared the formal documentation, my phone buzzed relentlessly with increasingly desperate text messages. "Dad, haven't received the tax payment yet. Due date is approaching. Are you having cash flow issues we should discuss? Natalie, Dad says you're being difficult about money after all they've done for you." "Really, Eliza? After they supported you through college?" I silenced my phone without responding, a small smile playing at my lips. Let them wonder. Let them worry for a change. 3 days later, I received an official notarized financial statement from Dominic's office. The detailed document cataloged every cent I'd contributed to my family over the past 5 years, methodically categorized by recipient, purpose, and date. It included a precise calculation of lost investment opportunity and a professional statement from Marcus Bennett verifying the legitimacy and accuracy of the comprehensive analysis. That same evening, I received a call from my mother. "Eliza, your father is extremely concerned about the property tax payment," she began, her voice carefully modulated to hide the underlying tension, using that soothing tone she always employed when trying to manipulate my emotions. "The final due date is next week. You know how anxious he gets about financial deadlines." "I know exactly when it's due, Mom," I replied coolly. "Well, will you be handling it? You've always been so reliable about these things. The family counts on you." The casual assumption in her voice ignited something primal inside me. 5 years of payments without a single genuine thank you. 5 years of giving until it hurt while they secretly, methodically built my sister's financial safety net. "Not this time," I said quietly but firmly. A long, stunned pause filled the line. "What do you mean?" Her voice held genuine confusion, as though the possibility had never occurred to her. "I mean, I'm not paying the property taxes anymore. Or any other family expenses. Not a single cent. But we're counting on you. The money is already allocated elsewhere. Your father has already." "To Natalie's trust fund, you mean?" The words hung in the air between us like a thrown gauntlet. Another lengthy silence stretched between us. "Your father told me you saw that," she finally said, her voice small. "Eliza, you have to understand." "I understand perfectly, Mom," I cut her off, my voice steady despite the anger churning inside me. I understand that I've contributed nearly $134,000 to this family over the past 5 years. While you and Dad have been telling me there wasn't enough money to help with my education or housing. I understand that I've been financing your luxury lifestyle while you've been secretly securing Natalie's future. I understand everything now. That's not fair, she protested weakly, but there was no conviction behind her words. No, it's not, I agreed coldly, and I ended the call and turned my phone off completely. Knowing the true storm was still on the horizon. My father wouldn't take this lying down. He'd always seen my financial support as an obligation, not the gift it actually was. The coming confrontation was inevitable. But for the first time, I felt completely prepared for it. The next morning, with a strange sense of calm purpose, I opened my laptop and made 3 significant financial changes. First, I permanently canceled the automatic payment for Natalie's car. Second, I systematically removed myself as an authorized payer on all family accounts. Third, I transferred $134,000 from my brokerage account to a new separate investment fund, deliberately labeled My Future, No Family Access. For the first time in years, I felt unburdened, as if a physical weight had been lifted from my shoulders. The constant anxiety of family financial expectations dissipated like morning fog, leaving clarity in its wake. The fallout was swift and explosive, exactly as I had anticipated. By noon, my phone was bombarded with frantic messages and missed calls. I finally turned it back on during my lunch break, watching notifications flood my screen with a strange emotional detachment, as if I were observing someone else's drama. Natalie called 7 times in rapid succession before sending a series of increasingly frantic texts. What the actual hell, Eliza? The bank says my car payment was declined. Are you trying to ruin my credit score? I have plans this weekend and I need my car. Dad is absolutely furious. Fix this now or I swear to God. My father's messages were more direct and commanding. Call me immediately. This is completely unacceptable behavior. You can't just abandon your responsibilities to this family. We raised you better than this. I ignored them all and focused instead on my trading day. The markets were particularly volatile, requiring my full attention and analytical skills. Only after closing my positions did I listen to the single voicemail my mother had left. Eliza, please, her voice trembled with emotion. Your father is beside himself with anger. The property tax notice came with a late fee warning. Natalie can't make her car payment. She'll lose her vehicle. We don't understand why you're doing this to the family. Whatever's upset you, we can talk about it like adults. Please call us back. Please. There was no mention of the trust fund issue. No acknowledgement of the years of financial support I had provided. Just intense pressure to resume the status quo that had benefited them so handsomely at my expense. I was composing a measured response when my building intercom buzzed unexpectedly. The security guard's professional voice came through the speaker. Ms. Parker, your father is here in the lobby demanding to see you. He's quite insistent and causing a bit of a scene. My stomach tightened, but I maintained my resolve. Tell him I'm not available. He's saying he won't leave until you come down. He's becoming rather disruptive. I sighed deeply. Then please call the police if he refuses to leave the premises. I'm not coming down. Very well, ma'am. 20 minutes later, I received a text from an unknown number. My cousin Connor just saw Uncle Victor being escorted from your building by security guards. What the hell is going on? Are you okay? I hadn't spoken to this particular cousin in months. I texted back a simple reply. I'm perfectly fine. Family financial disagreement that's been brewing for years. His response surprised me completely. About damn time you stood up to them. The way they've treated you versus Natalie has been obvious and wrong for years. The whole extended family sees it, even if no one says anything. I stared at my phone in genuine shock. I'd always assumed no one else in the family noticed or cared about the disparity in treatment. The unexpected validation from a relative. I barely spoke to was deeply affirming and brought unexpected tears to my eyes. My doorbell rang at precisely 7 p.m. I checked the security camera and saw Natalie standing there, arms crossed tightly over her designer coat, one foot tapping impatiently on the hallway carpet. I opened the door but deliberately blocked the entrance to my home. "What do you want?" I asked calmly. "What do I want?" she repeated incredulously, her perfectly highlighted hair swinging as she tilted her head. "I want you to explain why you're suddenly acting like a complete psycho." My car payment bounced. The bank called me. "Dad says you're refusing to pay the taxes on the lake house. What is wrong with you?" "Nothing is wrong with me," I said calmly. "I've simply stopped paying for your lifestyle." "Why? What's your problem? Is this some kind of power trip because your trading is going well?" "Not all of us can be financial geniuses, Eliza. The problem is that I've contributed almost $134,000 to this family over the last 5 years, while Dad has been secretly funding a trust just for you." Natalie's expression flickered rapidly, first genuine surprise, then unmistakable guilt, then defensive anger taking its place. "That's completely different," she insisted, adjusting her designer handbag on her shoulder. "The trust is for my future security. I need that safety net. You know how hard things have been for me. And I don't deserve security?" I challenged. "You've always been the fragile one. The one who needs protection," she said, as if that explained everything. "You've got your fancy trading career and your mathematical brain. I'm still trying to find my path. Not everyone has your advantages." "At 31, Natalie," I said pointedly, "while I pay your car payments and fund family vacations you post about on Instagram." She flushed visibly. "You've never once complained before. You seemed happy to help the family." "Because I didn't know I was being systematically manipulated. I didn't know that while I was draining my accounts to help the family, Dad was secretly funneling money into your trust fund." "It's not that much money," she mumbled, avoiding my gaze. $350,000 is a very significant amount by any standard." Her eyes widened in genuine shock. "How do you know the exact?" "I saw the document," I interrupted. A beat of uncomfortable silence passed between us. Then, remarkably, Natalie tried a different approach. Her expression softened dramatically as she reached for my arm with practiced sisterly affection. "Look, Eliza, I understand you're upset, and maybe you have some right to be. But we're family. We need your help right now. Dad says without the tax payment, they might lose the lake house where we spent all those childhood summers. Do you really want that to happen?" I stepped back deliberately, breaking her manipulative contact. "That's not my problem anymore. You'd really let them lose the vacation home where we spent every summer? All those memories? How can you be so cold and heartless?" I looked at my sister, really looked at her, and saw with perfect clarity the profound entitlement that had been carefully cultivated her entire life. She genuinely couldn't comprehend why I would stop financially supporting the family. The concept was literally inconceivable to her. "They have plenty of options," I said matter-of-factly. "They could use some of your precious trust fund." Natalie's face hardened instantly. "That's not fair. That's my future security." I smiled sadly. "No, Natalie, nothing about any of this has been remotely fair." I closed the door gently but firmly in her shocked face, the soft click of the lock providing a strange sense of satisfaction. 2 tense weeks passed. The property tax deadline came and went without any intervention from me. I maintained absolute radio silence, with my parents and Natalie focusing instead on my work and my own financial planning. Marcus had helped me completely restructure my investment portfolio. Now that I wasn't hemorrhaging money to my family, the difference was substantial and immediate. I could significantly increase my retirement contributions and even began seriously considering buying a small vacation property of my own, perhaps a mountain cabin, where I could find peace without family drama. My newfound sense of tranquility was shattered when I received an unexpected email. From Uncle Nathan, my father's younger brother. Eliza, what the hell is going on with Victor and the lake house? He's asking me for a $10,000 emergency loan to cover property taxes and penalties. Saying something about you suddenly refusing to help the family anymore. This doesn't sound like the niece I know. Everything okay? I sat staring at the screen, a bitter laugh escaping my lips. So my father was desperately approaching other family members for money rather than touching a single cent of Natalie's sacred trust fund. The manipulation never ended. I carefully composed a measured reply, attaching a PDF summary of my documented financial contributions to the family over the past 5 years, along with a brief, factual explanation of the trust fund situation I had discovered. Uncle Nathan's response came within an hour. Holy hell, Eliza. I had absolutely no idea it was this bad. None of us did. Victor's been telling everyone how he's struggling financially to help both his daughters equally. This changes everything. Do you need any support with this situation? The family should know the truth. The next day, my cousin Connor called unexpectedly. Eliza, there's something important you should know, he said, his voice carrying unusual urgency. There's a family meeting happening at your parents' house this weekend. Uncle Victor called it to discuss Eliza's abandonment of the family. He's actively trying to rally everyone against you. My stomach tightened painfully. Thanks for telling me. There's more, Connor continued, his voice dropping. I overheard my dad talking to your father yesterday. Apparently, they're planning to collectively guilt you into not just resuming payments, but covering all the late fees and penalties too. They're deliberately framing it as you maliciously damaging the family legacy. The sheer audacity was breathtaking. Are you going to this meeting? I asked. Yes, and so are you, Connor said, his voice unexpectedly firm. You need to set the record straight once and for all. I'll back you up completely. This has gone on long enough. I agreed, though anxiety churned in my stomach. Confronting my father with the extended family present would be incredibly challenging, but perhaps absolutely necessary to break the cycle permanently. When Saturday arrived, I dressed carefully in a professional black pantsuit. That always gave me confidence during difficult market negotiations. I drove to my parents' house, bringing the complete financial documentation from Dominic, including the notarized statements and detailed calculations of lost investment opportunity. The living room fell into immediate, uncomfortable silence when I walked in. My father stood by the stone fireplace, clearly in mid-speech. Aunts, uncles, and cousins sat arranged around the room, their expressions a confusing mix of concern, judgment, and curiosity. Natalie sat beside our mother on the expensive sofa, both looking visibly uncomfortable at my unexpected appearance. Eliza, my father recovered quickly, adjusting his stance. I'm glad you decided to join us. We were just discussing the unfortunate situation with the family vacation home. I'm sure you were, I replied evenly, setting my leather briefcase deliberately on the coffee table. And I'm certain you provided everyone with all the relevant financial information. His eyes narrowed dangerously. We're discussing your sudden refusal to meet long-standing family obligations. Interesting perspective. I opened my briefcase with steady hands. Because I have 5 years of meticulously documented financial records showing over $133,000 in family obligations I've already fulfilled. Money that apparently wasn't available to help with my education or housing but was somehow magically available for Natalie's substantial trust fund. A ripple of surprised murmurs spread through the room. My Aunt Olivia, always refreshingly direct, spoke up immediately. What trust fund are you talking about, Eliza? I looked directly at my father, giving him the opportunity to answer honestly. When he remained stubbornly silent, his face flushing, I calmly passed copies of the detailed summary document to everyone in the room. For the past 5 years, I've paid the property taxes on the lake house, covered Natalie's luxury car payments, funded family vacations I sometimes wasn't even invited to, and much more, totaling nearly $134,000. with lost opportunity costs. During this exact same period, my parents established a $350,000 trust fund exclusively for my sister. The room erupted in overlapping voices of shock and disbelief. My father's face flushed a dangerous shade of red. "These are private family financial matters," he thundered, his voice rising as he tried to regain control of the situation. "Exactly," Uncle Nathan interjected, standing up firmly. "Family matters. And in this family, we should treat our children equally. This isn't right, Victor, and you know it." I hadn't expected this level of outright support. As the room divided into heated discussions, my father's gaze locked with mine across the chaos. In his eyes, I saw something I'd never witnessed before: fear. The fear of exposure, of his carefully constructed narrative crumbling in front of extended family. And behind that fear, something even more unexpected: a grudging respect. The explosive family meeting ended with my father storming out, and my mother tearfully following him. Natalie sat frozen on the couch, refusing to make eye contact with anyone as the uncomfortable truth settled over the room. The rest of the family lingered, processing the shocking revelations. "I had absolutely no idea it was this bad," Aunt Olivia said, her voice rising with growing anger, as she examined the financial documentation. "Victor always portrayed you as the wildly successful one who didn't need or want any help." Uncle Nathan shook his head in disgust. "This isn't right or fair. The lake house has been part of our extended family memories for years. If you've been paying those taxes all this time, you should legally have some ownership stake in that property." I hadn't considered this angle before. The vacation property was titled solely in my parents' names despite my significant financial investment in maintaining it. "I don't actually want the house," I explained truthfully. "I just want them to recognize the fundamental unfairness of the situation and stop treating me like their personal ATM." Connor placed a supportive hand on my shoulder. "Recognition isn't nearly enough, Eliza. There should be real consequences for this level of manipulation." 3 days after the explosive family meeting, my phone lit up with a text from my father. No apology, no acknowledgement of wrongdoing, just 4 terse, entitled words. "The property taxes are due." I stared at the message, absolutely incredulous at his unshakable audacity. After everything that had been revealed to the entire family, he was still treating me like his personal financial resource. That evening, I received an unexpected call from my mother. "Eliza," her voice was hesitant, almost fearful, "your father isn't handling this situation well at all. The lake house means everything to him. It's his legacy. More than treating his daughters equally?" I challenged myself. Her telling silence spoke volumes. "Mom, I've contributed nearly $134,000 to this family. Dad created a $350,000 trust fund for Natalie without ever offering me similar support, or even acknowledging my contributions. The disparity is simply staggering." "I know," she admitted quietly, her voice barely audible. "I've always known it wasn't right. But your father makes all the financial decisions, and I didn't want to cause problems." "I understand," I finished for her, my tone softening slightly, "but this is where it stops. I won't be financially exploited anymore." The next morning, with a strange sense of finality, I texted my father back. With a single attachment, a photograph of the complete notarized financial record of my contributions over the past 5 years, with the total circled in bold red ink. No written message was necessary. The documentation spoke eloquently for itself. An hour after sending the photo, my phone rang. I expected my father's angry voice, but instead heard Natalie's, sounding uncharacteristically subdued. "Eliza," she sounded genuinely shaken. "Dad just showed me all the documentation you sent. Is it really that much? Over $133,000? "Yes, it is," I confirmed calmly. "Every penny meticulously documented and verified by a forensic accountant." There was a long, uncomfortable pause. "I had no idea," she said finally, her voice unsteady. Dad always told me you were helping out a little here and there because you had extra money from your trading. He never said you were covering all these major expenses while he was building my trust fund. Her voice cracked with emotion on the last words. For the first time in our adult lives, I heard what sounded like genuine remorse from my sister. Eliza, I don't know what to say. I feel horrible about all of this. It's not entirely your fault, I conceded, surprising myself with the admission. Dad created the situation, but I benefited from it for years, she acknowledged. And I never once questioned it. I just assumed I deserved the help somehow. Another long pause followed. Then Natalie surprised me completely. I'm going to fix this, she declared with unexpected determination. It's not right, and I won't be part of it anymore. Before I could ask what she meant, she abruptly ended the call. The next day, I received formal legal documentation from my father's attorney. The property taxes on the lake house had been paid in full, along with a legally binding amendment to the ownership structure. I now owned a 25% stake in the property that I had been maintaining for years. Attached was a brief note from the lawyer explaining that Natalie had insisted on using funds from her trust to cover the taxes and legal fees for the ownership transfer. My phone buzzed with a predictable text from my father. This wasn't necessary. Family helps family. I didn't bother responding. His message revealed that he still fundamentally didn't understand, or stubbornly refused to acknowledge, the profound unfairness of his actions. Minutes later, another text arrived, this one from my mother. Your father is struggling with all this, but I want you to know I'm proud of you for standing up for yourself. I should have done the same years ago. Can we meet for coffee next week? Just us? That evening, Natalie called again. I've asked Dad to split the trust fund equally between us, she said without preamble. He refused at first, but Uncle Nathan and Aunt Olivia backed me up. He's meeting with his financial advisor tomorrow to make the arrangements. I felt an enormous weight lifting from my shoulders, not because of the money itself, but because of what it symbolized: acknowledgement, fairness, respect. Thank you, Natalie, I said with genuine feeling. No, she replied softly. Thank you for finally making us face the truth. It's long overdue. Eleanor, after 15 years with Quantum Tech, we're restructuring your position, Vanessa Harper announced, her voice carrying a barely concealed note of satisfaction that made my stomach tighten. She sat across from me in the sleek glass-walled conference room, flanked by Corinne Wells from HR and legal, both of them wearing carefully crafted expressions of corporate regret that didn't reach their eyes. Behind them, the company's Innovation Through Diversity poster seemed to mock our meeting. The company is moving in a more innovative direction, Corinne added, sliding a digital tablet across the polished table. You've made great contributions to our AI framework, but we're joining the research team with the product development crew to be more responsive to market trends. I nodded thoughtfully, accepting the tablet without unlocking it. My smartwatch vibrated against my wrist, silently recording every word of this conversation. Inside the tablet would be the standard severance package: 2 weeks for every year of service, continued health coverage for 3 months, and a list of career counseling resources I would never use. I completely understand, I replied, my voice steady while my fingers discreetly tapped the side of my watch to bookmark this moment in the recording. These strategic pivots are never easy in our industry. Relief flashed across their faces, softening their professional masks. They'd clearly expected tears, protests, or the anger that society often expects from women in moments of injustice. After all, I was a 56-year-old woman being pushed out of the AI industry, where youth was prized above experience, and where my MIT doctorate suddenly meant less than a 20-something's familiarity with the latest programming language. What they didn't know was that I had anticipated this moment for weeks. Ever since a misdirected Slack thread had appeared in my workspace last month. We'd like you to transition your projects by Friday, Vanessa continued, gaining confidence from my apparent acceptance. Her red-soled shoes tapping rhythmically under the table. We'll need your access credentials, company devices, and cloud passwords before you leave. Your team will be informed of the reorganization this afternoon via our all-hands Zoom. My team. 6 brilliant engineers I had personally recruited and mentored over the years. People whose careers I had nurtured through an industry that wasn't always welcoming. The same team that had helped me develop the revolutionary cloud-based AI architecture that now powered Quantum Tech's flagship product. DataSphere, enterprise management software used by over 40% of Fortune 500 companies. Of course, I said, rising from my ergonomic chair, smoothing my blazer. Is there anything else you need from me during this transition? They exchanged glances, clearly thrown by my composure. When they'd been prepared for a scene. Vanessa recovered first, her practiced smile returning. That's all for now. I really appreciate you keeping things so professional during this restructuring. As I walked back to my office, my heels clicking against the polished concrete floors. I passed the larger glass-walled conference room where the executive team was meeting. Through the transparent barrier, I could see CEO Nathaniel Mercer gesturing animatedly at a digital display showing a PowerPoint presentation titled Q3 Revenue Projections and Innovation Roadmap. The same Nathaniel Mercer who had taken credit for my AI architecture at last year's Tech Future conference, referring to me only as one of our seasoned research team members, while his Instagram post later claimed, "My vision for AI is revolutionizing enterprise solutions." I closed my office door and pulled out my personal phone, my hands trembling slightly, with a mixture of anger and anticipation as I sent a single text message. It's happening. Friday is my last day at QD. They took the bait. The response from Malcolm came immediately, perfect timing. Contracts are ready. Dinner tonight to finalize details. The future is yours, Eleanor. I felt a flutter of excitement as I texted my niece Diana. It's done. Operation New Chapter begins. Her response appeared instantly, yes. You've got this, Aunt Elle. Can't wait to see their faces on Monday. I smiled as I looked at the digital calendar on my desk, next to the framed photo of Diana at her MIT graduation. Today was Wednesday. Friday I would leave Quantum Tech for the last time. And Monday would be absolutely fascinating. That evening, I met Malcolm Reed at Innovate, a sleek restaurant frequented by tech investors but far enough from Quantum Tech's headquarters to avoid curious eyes. As the CEO of Horizon Innovations, Quantum Tech's most forward-thinking competitor, Malcolm understood the value of discretion in our industry. He'd reserved a private dining space with advanced sonic privacy screens that prevented any conversation from being overheard, the latest tech from a security startup he'd invested in. They actually went through with it, Malcolm said, shaking his head after we ordered. His expression a mixture of disbelief and satisfaction. I had a feeling they would, but to let go of the person who built their main AI system. Nathaniel's always been a bit narrow-minded, but this is really surprising even for him. Nathaniel never truly understood what I actually created. I replied, the knot in my stomach finally starting to loosen as I sipped my sparkling water. He saw the user interface, the marketing angles, the quarterly profit potential. But the underlying neural architecture? That was just tech stuff that magically worked behind the scenes. He once called my technical explanation unnecessarily complicated in a board meeting. The irony was almost too perfect. 3 months ago, I discovered the patent application for my cloud-based AI architecture had never been filed by Quantum Tech's legal team and administrative oversight, they'd claimed. When I inquired through their ticketing system, they guaranteed me they'd fix it quickly. But their carefully crafted reply felt a little off, which made me want to explore the company's internal records further. That's when I found it, a strategy document in a supposedly restricted SharePoint folder outlining plans to claim the AI architecture as company-developed technology without specific inventor attribution. They'd planned to push me out before securing the patent, knowing intellectual property developed by employees typically belonged to the company. The document even referenced my age as a natural transition point. What Quantum Tech didn't know was that I'd already been working on refinements to the AI architecture on my own time using my personal cloud environment and equipment at my home office in Boston. Those improvements, which dramatically increased processing efficiency by 43% and reduced latency in multi-node environments, weren't covered by my employment agreement. I'd quietly filed for a patent under my own name last month, fully documented, with digital timestamps, GitHub commits, and development logs that clearly showed the work was completed outside of company time and resources. The patent had been granted with remarkable speed, thanks to Malcolm's introduction to a top-tier IP attorney who specialized in AI innovations by women in tech. All the paperwork is finalized and uploaded to our secure server, Malcolm said, now sliding a tablet across the table, its screen displaying a contract with Horizon Innovations logo. As soon as you sign digitally, Horizon officially acquires exclusive licensing rights to your patent. The press release goes out Monday morning across all major tech platforms, announcing you as our new Chief Innovation Officer and the architectural genius behind the next generation of enterprise AI. I reviewed the documents carefully on the tablet, though I'd already memorized the key terms during our encrypted video calls, a 7-figure signing bonus, substantial equity in Horizon Innovations, and ongoing royalties from all products using my AI architecture. What do you think Nathaniel's face will look like when he opens X on Monday morning? Malcolm asked, unable to hide his satisfaction at the prospect, the lines around his eyes crinkling. I'm more concerned about my team, I admitted, feeling a pang of loyalty toward the engineers who had trusted me. They don't deserve to be caught in the fallout of corporate games. Malcolm nodded, his expression softening. Already addressed. We have positions for all 6 of them if they're interested. Senior roles with significant raises and equity packages. Oliver Chen would head up implementation, reporting directly to you. I placed my thumb on the biometric signature field and watched as the contract finalized, with a subtle animation. In one elegant move, I had secured my future, protected my team, and ensured recognition for my work in an industry that too often overlooked women like me. To new beginnings and actual innovation, Malcolm said, raising his glass, the restaurant's ambient lighting reflecting in his eyes. And to standing up for your value in a world that often tries to ignore it, I added, clinking my glass against his, feeling truly powerful for the first time in years. Thursday and Friday passed in a blur of digital exit interviews, knowledge transferred Zoom meetings, and saying goodbye to colleagues through a mixture of virtual chats and brief in-person conversations. I maintained my professional composure throughout, even as rumors spread across the company's Slack channels like wildfire. Administrative assistants gave me sympathetic glances in the hallways. Junior developers approached awkwardly in the break room, asking if I'd provide LinkedIn recommendations and endorsements before I left. I documented everything meticulously in the company's knowledge base, every project, every API key, every cloud architecture decision, knowing full well that quantum tech would soon discover just how thorough they needed me to be. My heart raced with each file I uploaded to their system. My choice to write up thorough transition notes wasn't out of kindness. It was a strategic move, proof that I was doing the right thing when the company wasn't. This documentation is impressively detailed, remarked one of the junior developers, as I walked him through my code base. I simply smiled and said, thoroughness is part of good engineering practice. During my final exit interview on Friday afternoon, Corinne from HR and legal went through the standard checklist with mechanical efficiency, her eyes rarely leaving her tablet. You understand that any intellectual property developed during your employment remains the property of quantum tech, she stated, pushing a digital non-disclosure agreement across the table for my e-signature. Of course, I replied pleasantly, my fingertips tingling with anticipation. Anything developed within the scope of my employment, using company resources? During company time. I emphasized those qualifiers slightly, meeting her eyes directly. But Corinne was too busy checking boxes on her form to register the significance of my careful wording. And you affirm you have no copies of proprietary company information in your possession? I have taken nothing that belongs to quantum tech, I confirmed truthfully. My voice steady despite the adrenaline flowing through my veins. The patent was mine, after all, my creation, developed on my own equipment. During countless late nights at my home office. As I packed the personal items from my desk, family photos. A collection of conference badges marking 15 years of industry events. The custom mechanical keyboard my team had given me last Christmas, Vanessa stopped by. Leaning against my doorframe with artificial casualness. Her designer outfit immaculate as always. I just wanted to check that everything's clear for your transition, she said. Watching me place items into a sleek cardboard box emblazoned with a quantum tech logo. Crystal clear, I replied, carefully wrapping a small glass award I'd received. For the very AI architecture now at the center of my plans. The bitter irony wasn't lost on me as I placed it between layers of tissue paper. The words innovation excellence catching the light. You know, Eleanor, these strategic realignments are never personal, Vanessa continued. Her voice carrying that artificial warmth that never reached her eyes. Nathaniel feels the company needs to move. In a more innovative direction with fresh perspectives. I looked up, meeting her gaze directly, feeling a surge of indignation that I carefully contained. I understand completely. Business is business in the tech world. The constant pursuit of the new and shiny. There was something in how I spoke that made her hesitate. For a quick moment. I noticed a flicker of doubt on her perfectly made-up face, but she quickly covered it up. With a fake smile. What could a soon-to-be unemployed 56-year-old woman possibly do to a billion-dollar tech company? Will you be taking some time off to regroup? She asked, an artificial note of concern in her voice. Checking her smartwatch discreetly. Actually, I already have something lined up, I replied. Excitement bubbling beneath my professional veneer. I start Monday. Genuine surprise crossed her features, her eyebrows rising slightly. That's remarkably fast. Anything interesting in our industry? I smiled, savoring the moment. Very. A C-suite leadership position. I'm quite excited about the chance to fully implement my vision for AI architecture. She nodded absently, already mentally moving on to other matters. Clearly dismissing my claim as improbable. Well, good luck with that. The market is certainly challenging for experienced professionals. As I walked out of Quantum Tech's gleaming glass headquarters for the final time. Biometric access revoked and personal belongings in tow. I felt a strange mixture of liberation and anticipation washing over me. I took a moment to look back at the building where I'd spent 15 years of my career. Watching the sunset reflect off its windows like fire. On the top floor, I could see the executive conference room lit up for an evening meeting. Figures moving behind the glass. They were likely discussing how to redistribute my responsibilities among younger, less experienced, and significantly less expensive staff. Who couldn't possibly understand the nuances of the architecture I'd created. Little did they know that in less than 72 hours, that same room would be hosting an emergency crisis meeting instead, with frantic calls to lawyers and investors. As I stood there, Diana's text message came through. All set for Monday's big reveal? The countdown begins. Monday morning dawned bright and clear, sunlight streaming through my bedroom windows. I felt a surge of energy as I prepared for my new beginning. I dressed carefully in my new tailored charcoal suit with subtle blue accents. A power outfit I'd purchased specifically for this day. Feeling the luxurious fabric against my skin like armor. Today's the day everything changes. I whispered to my reflection, applying a final touch of lipstick. The Horizon Innovations Tesla arrived precisely at 7:30 a.m. The driver greeting me by name as I stepped outside my Boston home. My stomach fluttered with excitement as we glided through morning traffic toward their headquarters, where I'd start my first day as Chief Innovation Officer. The press release went live at 7 a.m. across all major tech platforms and social media channels. Malcolm informed me as I settled into my new corner office. With floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the Charles River. TechCrunch and Wired have already published feature articles. Hashtag AI Revolution. And hashtag Eleanor Sinclair are trending on X. I've got the communications team monitoring reactions and sentiment analysis in real time. The announcement had been crafted with strategic precision. Horizon Innovations acquires exclusive rights to revolutionary cloud-based AI architecture. Welcomes creator Dr. Eleanor Sinclair as Chief Innovation Officer. It detailed my MIT doctorate and industry background, emphasized my role as the sole inventor of the patented technology, and outlined how Horizon would be integrating the architecture into their next generation of enterprise solutions. Most importantly, it clearly stated that any company currently using the technology, including quantum tech, would need to negotiate licensing agreements with Horizon Innovations moving forward. At precisely 9:15 a.m., my phone lit up with the first text from my former team at Quantum Tech. Complete chaos here. Emergency all hands called. What did you do? It was from Oliver, my senior AI development manager. My heart was pounding with excitement as I smiled and wrote, "Hey, check your personal emails ASAP. You guys have offers waiting for you. Competitive pay, freedom to be creative, and the acknowledgement you need." Meanwhile, 8 miles away at Quantum Tech headquarters, the scheduled Monday morning executive meeting was undergoing a dramatic transformation. According to Oliver's play-by-play updates throughout the morning, Nathaniel had arrived at the office to find the company's general counsel and chief financial officer waiting at his glass-walled office, both ashen-faced and clutching tablets. The industry announcement had hit their inboxes and news feeds simultaneously, setting off immediate alarms throughout the building. By 9:30 a.m., what should have been a routine start-of-week meeting had morphed into an emergency crisis session. Board members were calling in remotely, their concerned faces filling the video wall. The legal team was frantically reviewing my employment contract and the documentation around the AI architecture's development, pulling files from cloud storage and local servers. "They're accessing every repository with your name on it," Oliver reported. "The CTO just ordered emergency access to all your old cloud instances and development logs. People are running between floors like it's a disaster movie." I could picture the scene perfectly, Nathaniel pacing the conference room in his designer suit, his carefully styled hair becoming disheveled as he demanded explanations from Vanessa and the legal department. The stock must have been feeling the impact of the news. Uncertainty drives investors crazy, and this announcement caused a huge stir. At 10:45 a.m., I received an email from Nathaniel himself, the desperation practically emanating from my screen. "Eleanor, there appears to be a significant misunderstanding regarding proprietary technology. Please call me at your earliest convenience to discuss a mutually beneficial resolution." I felt a surge of satisfaction as I forwarded it to Horizon Innovations' legal team, without responding, adding only the first contact, right on schedule. By noon, the tech industry was buzzing with speculation across every platform. Quantum Tech stock had dropped 7% since the market opened, while Horizon Innovations had seen a 12% increase. My phone wouldn't stop vibrating with notifications as journalists from TechCrunch, Wired, and the information requested interviews about the strategic coup that had shaken the enterprise software industry. #QuantumFail was trending alongside my name. "How are you feeling?" Malcolm asked, stopping by my office as I settled into my ergonomic chair, the view of the river sparkling behind me. "Validated," I replied honestly, emotion welling up in my chest. 15 years of watching others take credit for my work, of being told I should be grateful just to have a seat at the table despite my credentials, of watching younger male colleagues advance faster with half my expertise. And now, finally, recognition that makes my contributions visible to the world. My new executive assistant, a polished young woman who'd greeted me with genuine respect, appeared at the door. "Dr. Sinclair, the development team is ready for you." In the main conference room with the architecture implementation roadmap. And she hesitated, a hint of a smile on her face. "Quantum Tech CEO has called 4 times in the last hour. His assistant says it's extremely urgent. Please let him know I'm in strategic meetings all day." I replied calmly, gathering my tablet and standing up, feeling perfectly in control. I'll have our legal team reach out to discuss licensing options later this week. They'll need time to process their new reality. As I walked toward my first meeting as Chief Innovation Officer, my phone buzzed. With another update from Oliver, board just called emergency session with outside counsel. Nathaniel looks like he's about to have a coronary. He threw his phone across the room. P.S. My team and I accept your offer without hesitation. When can we start building something that actually matters? By Tuesday morning, the full impact of my departure had become crystal clear to everyone. At Quantum Tech, their flagship product, DataSphere, relied entirely on my AI architecture to process the massive cloud-based data sets that gave it an edge over competitors. My stomach fluttered with vindication as I scrolled through industry news. On my tablet over morning coffee. Without licensing rights to my patent, they faced two equally unpalatable options: negotiate with Horizon Innovations, or rebuild their core technology from scratch, a process that would take years and tens of millions in development costs. Nathaniel has called an all-hands meeting for 2 p.m. with mandatory attendance. Even for remote workers, Oliver texted. It was his last day at Quantum Tech. The notification made my heart race with anticipation. He and my old teammates are all set to join Horizon Innovations this coming Monday. The internal chat channels are exploding. Rumor is they're going to try to sue you for intellectual property theft. People are sharing links to your patent filing and arguing about the details. I felt a momentary flash of anxiety before reminding myself how meticulously I'd prepared. I forwarded his message to our legal department, who responded almost immediately. Let them try. Your documentation is impeccable: GitHub logs, digital timestamps, personal cloud environment usage, all clearly established and cryptographically verified. We've prepared extensively for this scenario. This is textbook defensive positioning. Meanwhile, I was settling into my new role with remarkable ease. The weight of years of underappreciation falling away like an old coat. The respect I received at Horizon Innovations was a stark contrast to my final years at Quantum Tech. When I spoke in meetings, people actually leaned forward and listened intently. My ideas weren't repackaged by younger male colleagues and presented as their own. At the next meeting, my decades of experience were viewed as invaluable assets rather than indicators that I was past my prime. The engineering team is implementing your architecture efficiency improvements in our sandbox environment, Malcolm informed me during our afternoon briefing, his eyes bright with excitement. Early testing shows a 51% performance boost and 27% reduction in cloud computing costs, even better than we projected. The team is honestly astonished. I had several architectural refinements I never shared with Quantum Tech, I admitted, feeling a tinge of professional satisfaction warm my chest. After I discovered they were planning to eliminate my position while claiming my work, I saw absolutely no reason to give them my best innovations. I refined the neural network topology completely on my own equipment. Their short-sightedness, our advantage, Malcolm replied with a satisfied smile, tapping his stylus against his tablet. Speaking of which, the first licensing inquiry came in this morning, not from Quantum Tech yet. They're still in denial, but from Enterprise Flow Systems. Their CTO called me directly. They're worried about being caught in the crossfire and want to ensure continuity for their customers. At 3:30 p.m., Oliver sent a detailed account of Nathaniel's all-hands meeting through our encrypted messaging channel. My heart pounded as I read through his play-by-play. The CEO had tried to project confidence in his expensive suit, assuring the staff that Quantum Tech would vigorously defend our proprietary technology through all available legal channels. But the anxiety in the room had been palpable, with side conversations breaking out across the Zoom chat. Several employees had already updated their LinkedIn profiles, sensing the company's vulnerability. Vanessa looked like she was about to faint when someone from engineering asked directly if they'd failed to secure the patent properly. Oliver reported, adding a shocked emoji. Her face literally drained of color on camera. Nathaniel muted everyone and cut the question period short after that. Then someone leaked your official patent documentation to the company-wide Slack channel. Absolute chaos erupted. By Wednesday, the industry fallout had intensified dramatically, rippling through every corner of the enterprise software market. Two major Fortune 100 clients had contacted Horizon Innovations about switching from DataSphere, concerned about Quantum Tech's ability to maintain the product without the architecture's creator. My LinkedIn profile had gained over 10,000 new followers overnight, with messages pouring in from women in tech congratulating me. Our stock has shot up by 8% again, while Quantum Tech is still plummeting. I saw that Corinne from HR and legal was calling me on video. The same woman who had just given me my severance package days before. I felt a little nervous as I accepted the call. Dr. Sinclair, she began, her voice carefully professional but strained around the edges. Her perfect composure finally showing cracks. I'm calling to discuss the situation with your patent. Our executive team believes there may have been a misunderstanding about ownership rights that we should clarify immediately. I don't think there's any misunderstanding whatsoever, I replied calmly, feeling a surge of confidence as I looked directly into the camera. My employment agreement clearly states that intellectual property developed on my own time, using my own resources, remains mine. Section 7.3, if you need to reference it. The patent documentation confirms exactly that, with verifiable timestamps and development environment logs. I'm sure your legal team has reviewed all this by now. Corinne's expression tightened. Nathaniel was hoping you might consider coming in personally to discuss options for an amicable resolution. He's prepared to be quite generous. Any discussions would need to go through Horizon Innovations' legal department now. I responded, my voice firm but professional. I'm sure they'd be happy to set up a meeting to discuss standard licensing terms that would allow Quantum Tech to continue using my architecture. The silence on the other end spoke volumes as Corinne's eyes darted off camera, presumably reading message notifications. Finally, she sighed, her professional mask slipping. I'll pass that along. For what it's worth. Dr. Sinclair, several of us are reassessing our positions here. That afternoon, I led my first formal presentation to Horizon Innovations Board of Directors, outlining our technology roadmap with my AI architecture at its center. My heart swelled with pride as I stood confidently at the head of the modern conference table, commanding attention, not hidden in the back as I had been at Quantum Tech, where I'd often been interrupted or spoken over. I caught Malcolm's approving nod as the board members leaned forward, fully engaged with my vision. By Friday, just 1 week after I had walked out of Quantum Tech for the last time, the company had entered full crisis mode, their carefully cultivated image of innovation leadership crumbling hour by hour. Their stock had fallen 23% from Monday's opening bell, triggering concerned calls from major investors and causing panic in their finance department. Industry analysts were publishing speculative pieces with titles like, "Can Quantum Tech survive the AI architecture crisis?" and "How one strategic blunder may cost a tech giant everything." My niece Diana called me during lunch, practically bouncing with excitement. "Aunt Elle, you're trending on X again. The women in my CS graduate program are using you as a case study in our ethics class about proper attribution and IP rights." Through my connections, I found out that Nathaniel finally admitted to the board just how bad things had gotten in a late-night emergency meeting that lasted until the clock struck 12. The reality had become impossible to ignore. Quantum Tech would need to either license my AI architecture from Horizon Innovations, likely at premium rates that would devastate their profit margins, or undertake a complete rebuild of DataSphere without using any technology covered by my patent. They've started interviewing for a new development team, Oliver informed me during our Friday video call, where we discussed his upcoming transition to Horizon Innovations. His apartment visible in the background was already half packed into boxes. Nathaniel's claiming they can recreate the functionality in 6 months with a fresh approach. He's trying to spin it as an opportunity for innovation. I couldn't help but laugh, the absurdity of it washing over me. 6 months? The original architecture took me 3 years to perfect. And that was with intimate knowledge of the problem space and enterprise requirements that nobody else has. The neural network optimization alone took 8 months. Exactly, Oliver agreed, shaking his head in disbelief. Nobody with actual technical knowledge is believing the timeline. Especially after your team posted our resignation letters simultaneously on the company portal. The knowledge drain is massive and getting worse by the hour. 3 more senior engineers gave notice this morning. That afternoon, Quantum Tech's attorneys finally reached out to Horizon Innovations to open a dialogue about potential licensing arrangements, their initial bluster notably absent. Our legal team, following the strategy we set up, responded with terms that seemed fair. But had a clever twist. They asked for 3 times the usual licensing rate. And wanted to publicly acknowledge me as the inventor and the only one with the patent. They'll balk at the acknowledgement more than the cost. Malcolm predicted as we reviewed the response in his office. The late afternoon sun streaming through the windows. Nathaniel's ego won't allow him to publicly admit he pushed out the person who created their core technology. It would destroy the innovation leader narrative he's built his personal brand on. Then they'll have to rebuild from scratch, I replied, feeling a strange mix of vindication and professional curiosity. And every day they spend trying to replicate my work is another day we extend our lead in the market with the improvements I've already implemented. The architecture gap will only widen. Malcolm smiled, leaning back in his chair. The board is already talking about your architecture as the cornerstone of our 5-year strategy. You've transformed this company's future in less than a week, Eleanor. The following Monday morning, 10 days after my unceremonious dismissal, I led the first meeting with my newly assembled innovation team in Horizon's state-of-the-art collaborative workspace. Oliver and the other 5 engineers from Quantum Tech joined both in person and via high-definition video conference. My heart swelled with pride as I looked around at these brilliant minds I'd mentored, now free to create without artificial constraints. The energy in the room was electric, almost tangible. As we mapped out the next evolution of my AI architecture on interactive displays. This is how development meetings should actually be, commented Sophia, one of my former team members at Quantum Tech, her eyes bright with enthusiasm, as she manipulated a 3D visualization of our neural network topology. At Quantum Tech, we spent half our time explaining basic concepts to executives who would nod politely and then completely ignore our technical recommendations anyway. That's the fundamental difference between being valued as innovators and being seen as replaceable resources, I replied, feeling a deep connection with my team as they nodded in agreement. Here at Horizon, your expertise isn't just recognized, it's celebrated and given room to flourish. We build upon each other's strengths instead of competing for visibility. I introduced my niece Diana, who had joined as our ethical AI implementation intern, watching proudly as she confidently outlined her research on bias detection algorithms. The team immediately embraced her fresh perspective, building upon her ideas rather than dismissing them as they might have at Quantum Tech. As we wrapped up the extraordinarily productive session, where we'd accomplished more meaningful progress than in months at our previous company, my new executive assistant appeared at the doorway, her expression revealing she had significant news. Dr. Sinclair, there's been a major development with Quantum Tech that you'll want to hear immediately, she announced, tablet in hand. Their board just released a statement announcing an emergency leadership change. Nathaniel Mercer is stepping down as CEO, effective immediately. The news is breaking across all tech platforms right now. The room fell silent for a moment before erupting in surprised conversations. I felt a complex mix of vindication and professional satisfaction wash over me, though not the petty triumph some might have expected. The news spread like wildfire through the tech industry's digital channels. Within hours, TechCrunch, The Information, and other industry publications were reporting that Quantum Tech's board had lost confidence in Nathaniel's leadership following The patent oversight that threatened the company's flagship product and wiped nearly a quarter of its market value in a single week. #MercerOut was trending nationally. Vanessa Harper is also out, Oliver added, reading from his phone with undisguised satisfaction. Along with the head of legal who failed to properly secure the patent. The company's official statement mentions critical operational oversights and a failure to protect core intellectual assets. That evening, as I was in my home office going through our implementation strategy, I got an unexpected email from William Barrett, the recently appointed interim CEO of Quantum Tech. Unlike Nathaniel's desperate message from the previous week, this one was straightforward, professional, and notably respectful. Dr. Sinclair, congratulations on your new position at Horizon Innovations. I've been brought in by the board to help Quantum Tech navigate through the current situation and rebuild trust with our stakeholders. I'd like to discuss a fair licensing arrangement for your patented AI architecture. We're prepared to acknowledge your contributions publicly and make appropriate amends for the oversights of previous management. The board recognizes the value of your innovations and wishes to establish a more ethical relationship moving forward. Would you be available to meet next week to discuss terms? My heart pounded as I read the message twice, savoring the professional respect that had been so long withheld. I forwarded the email to Malcolm, adding a simple note. Phase 1 complete. Vindication feels even better than I imagined. His reply came quickly, beautifully executed, Eleanor. The board is celebrating your first major victory for Horizon Innovations. Your strategic patience has paid off brilliantly. Looks like Quantum Tech is finally learning an expensive lesson about valuing innovation and the innovators behind it, especially when those innovators happen to be experienced women. 3 months after my departure from Quantum Tech, I sat on the illuminated stage at the International AI Innovation Conference, preparing to deliver the keynote address. My hands trembled slightly with excitement, not nervousness. The audience was filled with industry leaders, technology journalists, venture capitalists, and aspiring developers, many of whom now knew my story. Diana sat in the front row, beaming with pride, her presence reminding me that this moment was about more than personal victory, it was about changing the landscape for the next generation. And now I'm pleased to introduce our keynote speaker. The conference organizer announced to the packed auditorium and thousands of virtual attendees. Dr. Eleanor Sinclair, Chief Innovation Officer at Horizon Innovations and creator of the revolutionary cloud-based AI architecture that has transformed enterprise data processing across multiple industries. Dr. Sinclair's journey represents both technical brilliance and the importance of recognizing intellectual contributions in our field. The applause was thunderous as I approached the podium, the stage lights warm on my face. What a profound difference a few months could make in one's professional life. Last year, I had attended this same conference as part of the Quantum Tech delegation, seated in the back of the room while Nathaniel gave a presentation about his visionary leadership in AI innovation, never once mentioning my name or contributions. Thank you for that warm welcome, I began, surveying the sea of attentive faces and active virtual participants in the augmented reality display only I could see. Today, I want to talk about something deeply personal to all creators and innovators, the intersection of technical innovation, proper attribution, and the critical importance of valuing intellectual contributions, regardless of where or whom they come from. My presentation detailed the technical aspects of my AI architecture using interactive visualizations, but also touched on the broader issues of recognition, respect, and inclusion in the technology sector. Without directly mentioning Quantum Tech, I emphasized the importance of companies protecting and celebrating their innovators rather than seeing them as replaceable resources in the corporate machine. Innovation isn't abstract, it's deeply human, I said, my voice carrying throughout the hall. It comes from real people with real insights, often from perspectives that don't fit the traditional mold. When we dismiss those voices or fail to recognize their contributions, we don't just hurt individuals, we hurt progress itself. Afterward, during the reception, several young women engineers And developers formed a line to speak with me, many with tears in their eyes, seeking advice and mentorship. One of them, barely in her 30s, confided, "Your story changed everything about how I approach my work. I've started to keep a detailed record of what I do on my own time, and I'm more proactive about acknowledging everyone's input in meetings." "That's incredibly smart," I replied, squeezing her hand encouragingly. "Your innovations deserve protection, and you deserve recognition for your brilliance. Never let anyone convince you otherwise." As the evening concluded, I checked my phone to find an industry news alert. That made me catch my breath. Quantum Tech had finally announced the comprehensive licensing agreement with Horizon Innovations, publicly acknowledging me by name as the architecture's creator and sole patent holder. Their stock had stabilized, though at a significantly lower valuation than before my departure. 1 year to the day after being told to transition my projects, I sat in my spacious corner office at Horizon Innovations, reviewing the quarterly innovation report on my tablet. The view of the Charles River through my windows reflected the autumn sunshine, mirroring my inner sense of accomplishment. Under my leadership, the company had released 3 groundbreaking enterprise products built on my AI architecture, capturing significant market share from Quantum Tech and other competitors who had underestimated the power of diverse perspectives in technology. A knock at my door interrupted my analysis. It was Malcolm, holding a bottle of champagne and 2 crystal flutes, his expression one of genuine respect and friendship. "Happy anniversary, Eleanor," he said warmly, setting the glasses on my desk. "The board asked me to share the news with you personally before the public announcement tomorrow morning. Horizon Innovations has officially surpassed Quantum Tech in market valuation for the first time in company history. Your architecture has become the industry standard." I smiled, feeling not triumph but a deep, quiet satisfaction that warmed me from within. This is what happens when you give proper credit to new ideas and the people who make them happen. Technology doesn't just come to life on its own. As Malcolm poured the champagne, my assistant delivered a sleek envelope with embossed lettering. Inside was an invitation to be the keynote speaker at Women in Technology's annual Leadership Summit. The topic they requested: owning your intellectual value. How proper documentation and self-advocacy changed an industry. "You've become something of an icon in tech circles, you know," Malcolm commented, noticing the invitation with approval. The story about the executive who didn't recognize what he had until it was gone has become a cautionary tale discussed in corporate boardrooms and business schools across the country. I heard Harvard Business School is writing a case study. William Barrett, who had remained as Quantum Tech's CEO after stabilizing the crisis, had implemented sweeping changes in how the company recognized and rewarded innovation. Their new policies on intellectual property protection and inventor recognition were reportedly modeled directly after the program I had established at Horizon Innovations, with explicit protections for diverse voices in the development process. "It was never about revenge or taking them down," I said, raising my glass in a toast, feeling the emotion of the moment. "It was about recognition. About showing the industry that innovation isn't anonymous or abstract. It comes from real people with real passion who deserve real credit for their contributions. And maybe, just maybe, about making the path a little easier for the next generation of women in tech to proper recognition and valuing brilliance in all its forms." Malcolm agreed, clinking his glass against mine. As the afternoon sun streamed through my office windows, catching the award displayed prominently on my desk, AI Innovator of the Year, I reflected on my journey with a sense of profound satisfaction. At the age of 57, I discovered what I had been missing in my career. It wasn't just about being successful or earning money, but actually being appreciated for my work. My name was now permanently attached to the AI architecture that had changed an industry, exactly where it belonged. And somewhere out there, other women were watching, learning, and finding the courage to ensure their brilliance was recognized too. The text arrived while I was arranging displays for tomorrow's buyer showcase at my boutique. My fingers trembled slightly against the cool silk of a new dress I had designed as I read the message. I'm leaving you and moving to Key West with my 22-year-old girlfriend. I've already emptied our joint account. My heart hammered against my ribs, but I forced my hands to stay steady. My voice remained perfectly calm as I helped Mrs. Reynolds select a scarf that complemented her silver hair. The only visible sign that my husband of 13 years had just demolished our marriage via text was a slight tightening around my eyes and the way I clutched the cashmere scarf a fraction too tightly. This shade brings out the blue in your eyes beautifully, I said, my professional mask firmly in place despite the storm raging inside me. The boutique's warm lighting caught the subtle shimmer in the fabric, distracting me momentarily from the cruel words still glowing on my phone screen. I waited until Mrs. Reynolds left, her purchase wrapped in our signature silver paper with the Elaine Winters Designs logo embossed on the corner, before typing my response. My fingers hovered over the keyboard as I considered and rejected a dozen replies, finally settling on just 2 words. Good luck. My name is Elaine Winters, and at 39, I just received the most callous goodbye in relationship history. But while Trevor was probably gloating over his grand exit, imagining me collapsed in tears over his betrayal, I was methodically checking inventory for tomorrow's crucial meeting with the department store buyers, my mind already calculating my next steps. The signs had been there for months, like neon warning signals. I'd been quietly documenting the late nights at work that never matched his paid deposits, the sudden password changes on his phone, the way he'd started going to the gym religiously, buying new clothes that were too young for him, constantly checking his reflection in every mirror we passed, desperately trying to recapture his youth with embarrassing intensity. 3 months ago, I'd found a receipt for dinner for 2 at an expensive restaurant, on a night he'd claimed to be working late on a big project. My stomach had twisted with a sickening certainty as I recognized the name of that particular restaurant, known for its romantic atmosphere. That same evening, with hands that refused to shake, I'd opened a separate bank account at a different bank, transferring my design sketches and business documents to a secure location. A week later, when Trevor mentioned wanting to combine our accounts to simplify things, I'd agreed cheerfully while systematically moving my personal savings to the new account, my smile never wavering as I signed the necessary paperwork. The joint account he just emptied contained exactly enough to keep him from getting suspicious, about 2 months' worth of regular deposits that I could afford to lose. The rest was safely tucked away in accounts he knew nothing about, along with detailed records, photographs, and timestamps of every suspicious transaction he'd made over the past year, meticulously organized in both digital and physical form. My phone buzzed again, sending a jolt of anger through my chest that I quickly suppressed. Don't bother begging. Brittany and I leave tomorrow. I'll send for my things later. Brittany Hayes, the new marketing intern at his office. The face of this betrayal suddenly had a name that tasted bitter on my tongue. I'd met her at the company Christmas party, watched her laugh too loudly at Trevor's jokes with stars in her eyes, noticed how she touched his arm when she thought no one was looking, her youthful fingers lingering a moment too long. She was young enough to be his daughter, naive enough to think she was special, blind enough not to see the predatory gleam in his eyes that had nothing to do with love. I didn't respond to his text. Instead, I called Catherine Patel, my lawyer, the one I'd consulted 2 months ago when I'd found the hotel charges on our credit card statement and felt the first true cracks in the foundation of my marriage. It's time, I said simply, my voice stronger than I expected. He just made his move. The papers are ready, she replied, a steely determination in her voice that matched my own. I'll file them first thing tomorrow morning. Do you want me to have him served in Key West? I know someone who can make it especially public. No rush, I replied, a small smile playing at my lips despite the ache in my chest. Let him think he's won first. Let him celebrate his victory before he discovers the battlefield has changed. Another text from Trevor appeared on my screen. I know this must be hard for you. You're not getting any younger, after all. At least you have your little hobby shop to keep you busy while you adjust to being alone. My little hobby shop, the successful boutique I'd built from scratch. After putting myself through design school at night, it had grown from a single rack of my designs into a respected local fashion destination, generating more income than his middle management position ever had. And yet, despite his repeated suggestions that we should combine everything, I had carefully kept its profits separate from our joint finances. I smiled, thinking of the certified letters that would greet him in Key West, and the look on his face when he realized what I'd been preparing for months. Let him enjoy his moment of triumph. It would be short-lived, like most of his enthusiasms. I spent that evening in our house, my house, to be precise, since I'd inherited the charming two-story Victorian from my grandmother and steadfastly kept it in my name despite Trevor's repeated suggestions to add him to the deed for tax purposes. The old hardwood floors creaked comfortingly under my feet as I moved through the rooms. Another lucky instinct that had paid off in ways my younger self could never have imagined. While organizing the paperwork Catherine would need, my fingers brushed against our wedding album tucked away in my grandmother's antique desk. The leather cover felt cool against my fingertips. As I hesitated, then opened it. Trevor looked so different then, his smile genuine and warm, before his midlife crisis had turned him into a caricature of his former self. These days he squeezed into shirts too tight for his softening middle, the buttons straining against the fabric. He tried too hard to connect with the 20-somethings at his office with awkward fist bumps. Used slang that sounded ridiculous coming from a man of 47 who complained about his back pain in the next breath. My phone kept buzzing with texts from him, each one more condescending than the last. Each one making my jaw tighten with a mixture of anger and disbelief at his cruelty. I've been planning this for months. Brittany understands me in ways you never could. She appreciates a man who takes charge. You'll be fine. Maybe you'll find someone your own age. Someone who doesn't mind a woman who's always working. Already told my family. They agree we grew apart. It's nobody's fault really. Mom says she always thought you were too career-focused. My fingers moved automatically to screenshot each message, the familiar action calming my racing thoughts as I added them to my evidence folder. Let him dig his hole deeper with every self-incriminating word. Catherine would absolutely love his casual admission of premeditation. His gleeful announcement about emptying our account. The paper trail of betrayal he was creating with each smug message. The last text caught my attention, making my heart race with a mixture of outrage and satisfaction. By the way, I used the joint card to book our first-class flights and suite at the Royal Palm. Consider it my parting gift to myself. Perfect. With hands that suddenly felt steady and strong, I called the credit card company. Mrs. Winters speaking, I said, my voice clear and confident. I need to report fraudulent charges and cancel a card immediately. Of course, ma'am, the representative replied. Can you identify the specific charges you're disputing? 2 first-class tickets to Key West booked today. Suite charges at the Royal Palm Resort. And I'll need to permanently remove my husband as an authorized user on this account. I explained, a strange sense of power flowing through me as I took back control. Do you have documentation of the fraud we can add to the report? The representative asked, her professional tone precise. Text messages from my husband explicitly admitting he used our joint card to book travel with his girlfriend after emptying our bank account, I replied, feeling a surge of vindication. I'll be happy to forward them to whatever email address you provide. The representative's professional tone couldn't quite hide her satisfaction as she canceled the charges. I've processed this as fraud, Mrs. Winters. The charges have been reversed, and I've issued a new card. That will arrive in 2 to 3 business days. Your husband's access has been terminated. Trevor and Brittany would arrive at the airport tomorrow to find their tickets invalidated. Their luxury suite reservation cancelled. Their Grand Key West getaway crumbling before it began. The thought sent a wave of satisfaction through me that was both petty and deeply deserved. My phone buzzed again, the screen lighting up the darkened room. Don't worry about the house. I'll let you stay there until you find something smaller. I know how much you love that old place, even with all its problems. I actually laughed out loud at that one, the sound echoing in the vintage kitchen. My grandmother had lovingly maintained and I had carefully restored. Did he really think he had any claim to my family home? Had his ego grown so large that he'd forgotten whose name was on the deed? Who paid the property taxes, who had refused his every attempt to invest in upgrades that would have erased its character? Another buzz, and I know the shop means a lot to you. We can work out a fair payment for your half. My financial advisor says it's worth considering if we liquidate quickly. Half of my business that I'd conceived in design school. Built myself from a single rack of clothing, funded myself through lean years and sleepless nights, grown myself while he complained about my long hours and called it my expensive hobby, even as he enjoyed the lifestyle it provided. My fingers tightened around my phone so hard I feared the screen might crack. I poured a glass of wine, the good Bordeaux I'd been saving for a special occasion. The bottle Trevor had once claimed was wasted on your unsophisticated palate. The rich ruby liquid caught the light as I savored the first sip. This definitely qualified as a special occasion. Tomorrow Trevor would learn some hard truths about property law and separate assets. About consequences and karma. But tonight, I'd enjoy the quiet of my grandmother's house, surrounded by my designs and plans, and start mapping out my next chapter, one that would be entirely my own. Morning brought a flurry of increasingly angry texts from Trevor, each one making my phone vibrate with growing intensity like the warning tremors before an earthquake. What the hell did you do to our credit card? The airline won't honor our tickets. The hotel canceled our reservation. Answer me. This is completely unacceptable. Fix it now. Call me immediately or I swear you'll regret this. My thumb hovered over the screen for just a moment before I silenced my phone and slipped it into my bag. A strange sense of calm washed over me, despite the digital tirade. The warm spring sunshine felt particularly sweet as I walked to my boutique. The familiar route suddenly brimming with new possibilities. Friday was always our busiest day, and I had a new collection of my designs to arrange. For the department store buyers. Life doesn't pause for betrayal. Even when your husband runs off with an intern young enough to be his daughter. The boutique was my sanctuary, the gleaming hardwood floors I'd refinished myself. The elegant display cases Trevor had called unnecessarily expensive. The subtle scent of the signature perfume I'd had created specially for the space. My assistant manager smiled knowingly as I walked in. Rough morning, she asked, noticing something in my expression I thought I'd hidden. Just the usual drama, I replied, forcing a smile that gradually became genuine. As I immersed myself in work. Let's focus on the buyers coming tomorrow. This could change everything for us. Around noon, my phone lit up with a different name, Vivian Winters. My mother-in-law. I took a deep breath, stepped into my back office, and answered. Elaine, dear. Her voice held the artificial warmth of someone who'd rehearsed their lines. Trevor told us everything about how controlling you've been with finances. How you drove him away with your constant working. He says you're being vindictive now. Causing problems with his travel plans deliberately. We're very disappointed in your behavior. I put her on speaker while continuing to arrange my newest sketches. For tomorrow's presentation, the rhythmic movement of my hands keeping me centered. As anger flared in my chest. Did Trevor happen to mention emptying our joint account? And charging first-class tickets for him and his 22-year-old girlfriend on our credit card? I asked, my voice deceptively light. Or did that detail somehow slip his mind during his version of events? Silence stretched between us, thick with unspoken truths. Then, well, he said you left him no choice, that you'd been cold and distant. Always focused on your little shop instead of your marriage. My hand tightened around the fabric swatch I was holding, the silk crumpling in my grip. Vivian, I have his texts. Would you like me to read them to you? The one where he bragged about taking our money, or maybe the one where he mocked my age and called my successful business a hobby? I'm happy to forward them to you. If you'd like to know what your son really thinks about women over 30. Another pause, longer this time. When her voice returned, it had lost some of its certainty. He did seem rather harsh in his description. I told him that text message about your age was completely inappropriate. That wasn't how we raised him to speak to anyone, let alone his wife. I sighed, feeling suddenly exhausted by the whole charade. I appreciate the call, Vivian. I've always respected you. But I think it's best if we end this conversation now. Catherine Patel, my lawyer, has advised minimal contact with Trevor and his family during the legal proceedings. Legal proceedings? Already? Her voice rose in alarm. Elaine, surely this can be worked out without. Goodbye, Vivian, I said firmly, ending the call and returning to my sketches. Finding solace in the clean lines and vibrant colors that represented my future, not my past. By late afternoon, the boutique was buzzing with customers. And my phone was buzzing with notifications. Trevor's sister Diane was apparently spreading family gossip through mutual friends on Facebook. Screenshots forwarded by well-meaning acquaintances revealed the unfolding drama. Trevor and Brittany were stuck at a budget motel near the airport. Their Key West dreams temporarily derailed in a decidedly unglamorous fashion. According to Diane's private messages, Trevor had tried using his personal credit cards. But they'd been declined one after another, maxed out for months on secret expenses. Another red flag I'd noticed and documented in my growing evidence file. As I helped a customer find the perfect evening dress, my phone lit up with Catherine's name. The emergency hearing is scheduled for Monday at 9 a.m., she said without preamble. Her voice carrying the professional satisfaction of someone who knows they have the upper hand. Given his documented admission of emptying the joint account and the clear credit card fraud, we're in an exceptionally strong position to freeze all remaining assets and possibly pursue punitive damages. Has he been served yet? I asked, stepping away from the sales floor into my quiet design studio, running my fingers over a bolt of emerald silk I'd been saving for a special creation. Not yet, Catherine replied with a hint of anticipation in her voice. But he'll get the papers at his new accommodations, the Airport Budget Lodge, room 118. Speaking of which, have you seen his girlfriend's Instagram stories? They're providing excellent additional evidence. She's been posting about their adventure and a new beginnings all day, including some rather unflattering comments about your controlling behavior and how Trevor deserves someone who appreciates his ambitions. I smiled despite the sting of the words, thinking of my own meticulous documentation, a year's worth of suspicious charges highlighted in color-coded spreadsheets, hotel receipts saved in chronological order, text messages and emails that proved premeditation saved in multiple formats. Trevor had been so focused on his grand escape, so certain of his cleverness, that he'd never considered I might be watching, waiting, preparing for the moment his true character revealed itself. My phone buzzed with another text, this one making my heart rate spike with its audacity. You think you're so smart with your little lawyer tricks. But I made copies of all the boutique's financial records and design contracts. Half that business is mine. My financial advisor says I'm entitled to half of everything you've built during our marriage. Expect a fight. I forwarded the text to Catherine immediately, adding it to the growing file of Trevor's mistakes. Another piece of evidence showing his true intentions, his entitlement, his complete misunderstanding of business law. Let him learn the hard way about separate assets and intellectual property rights in business ownership. As I locked up the boutique that evening, watching the setting sun cast golden light across my window displays featuring my newest designs, a strange sense of peace settled over me. Sometimes the best revenge isn't elaborate schemes or matching cruelty with cruelty, sometimes it's simply being prepared when someone shows you exactly who they are. The emergency hearing on Monday morning was everything I could have hoped for and more. It was the perfect culmination of preparation meeting opportunity. The courthouse's imposing marble columns seemed to stand in judgment as I walked in, dressed in one of my own designs, a perfectly tailored midnight blue suit that projected both confidence and restraint. Trevor showed up 15 minutes late in his new young wardrobe, designer jeans too tight for his thickening waist, a blazer with ostentatious logo stitching that screamed midlife crisis, and a graphic t-shirt that would have looked more appropriate on a college student. His hair was freshly dyed, the artificial darkness making the lines around his eyes more pronounced rather than less. Brittany waited outside on a bench, her youth painfully obvious under the harsh courthouse lighting, her fingers constantly typing on her phone, documenting their journey for her followers even as it unraveled in real time. The contrast between us couldn't have been more stark, and I felt a surge of confidence as Catherine opened her meticulously organized presentation folder. My lawyer presented our evidence methodically, building an ironclad case piece by piece, Trevor's gleeful text about emptying our account displayed on a large screen for the judge to see. His credit card fraud documented with timestamps and account records. His documented history of hidden expenses highlighted in colorful graphs showing the patterns of deception, each piece carefully collected over months of quiet observation and planning. Your Honor, Trevor's hastily hired lawyer attempted, adjusting his tie nervously. My client admits to some impulsive decisions made in the heat of emotion. But Mrs. Winter's actions have been vindictive and calculating, designed to embarrass my client and damage his reputation deliberately. Calculating? Catherine countered, her voice carrying the quiet authority of absolute certainty. You mean prudent and protective. My client safeguarded her separate assets and maintained detailed records of her husband's suspicious behavior over many months. That's not vindictive, that's intelligent self-preservation and responsible business management. The judge, a woman in her 60s with shrewd eyes that missed nothing, reviewed my documentation carefully, the separate property deed to the house that had been in my family for generations, the boutique's incorporation papers in my name only, my design patents and trademarks, the careful separation of business and personal finances that Trevor had always complained about as unnecessarily complicated and showing a lack of trust. Mr. Winters, the judge addressed Trevor directly, her tone making it clear she wasn't impressed by his appearance or arguments. You admitted via text message to deliberately emptying a joint account and using shared credit cards to fund a luxury trip with your girlfriend. The language you used indicates this was planned and deliberate. Do you deny sending these messages? Trevor shifted uncomfortably in his too tight jeans, his confidence visibly deflating with each passing moment. I was just trying to make a clean break, he muttered, not meeting her eyes. The situation was toxic. By committing what appears to be financial fraud. The judge raised an eyebrow, her tone making the courtroom feel suddenly colder. And now you're claiming rights to property that documentation clearly shows is separate from marital assets? Property that was inherited and maintained separately throughout the marriage? The business grew substantially during their marriage, Trevor's lawyer tried again, his voice betraying his lack of preparation. My client provided emotional support and business connections that contributed to its growth. The business was established before the marriage, Catherine interrupted smoothly. And Mrs. Winters maintained strict separation of business and personal finances throughout. As these records demonstrate, we have documentation of every penny invested and earned, signed financial agreements predating the marriage, and proof that Mr. Winters repeatedly dismissed the business as her hobby and a little shop rather than acknowledging it as the significant enterprise it is. I watched as reality sank in, the color draining from Trevor's cheeks, as his confident smirk twisted into a look of growing panic. He had thought this would be easy, empty our accounts, run off with his young girlfriend for a glamorous new life, maybe even claim half my business in the divorce to fund his continued adventures. He'd never bothered to understand. My insistence on keeping things separate had mocked my careful bookkeeping as obsessive and untrusting, never realizing I was protecting myself from exactly this scenario. Furthermore, Catherine continued, producing a final piece of evidence. I'd like to submit this contract from Nordell's department store, signed yesterday, commissioning Mrs. Winters' designs for their spring collection, the very designs Mr. Winters dismissed as a hobby in his communications. The judge reviewed the contract, which included a substantial advance payment. Then looked up at Trevor with obvious disapproval. The court finds sufficient evidence of financial misconduct, she announced, her voice carrying the weight of authority. All shared assets are frozen pending final dissolution. Mr. Winters is ordered to return any funds removed from joint accounts within 24 hours. But that money's gone. Trevor protested, his voice cracking slightly. We spent it on. Then I suggest you find a way to replace it, the judge cut him off sharply. Sell your car if necessary. And Mr. Winters, the court takes a very dim view of using shared credit cards to fund adventures with paramours, while mocking your wife's legitimate business ventures. This behavior will be considered when determining the final settlement. Trevor's face flushed with anger and embarrassment as he turned to glare at me. But I kept my expression neutral, refusing to give him the emotional reaction he sought. Outside the courthouse, I heard Brittany asking Trevor about their Key West plans. In an increasingly anxious voice, her Instagram-ready confidence crumbling as reality intruded on their fantasy. His response was lost in the sound of my heels clicking confidently across the marble floor, heading back to the business he'd never understood or respected, but which would now carry me forward into a future entirely of my own making. The next few weeks brought a string of increasingly desperate moves from Trevor, each more transparent than the last. As I focused on expanding my boutique and finalizing my department store collaboration, he seemed determined to claim credit for my success through increasingly creative means. He tried claiming the entire business concept had been his idea during a party conversation years ago. He suddenly remembered investing significant money in its early days, money that mysteriously appeared in no bank records. He even suggested he'd been my silent business partner all along, claiming he'd provided crucial industry connections, claims quickly disproven by my meticulous records showing the actual industry events where I'd made those connections myself, often while he was working late. He's getting truly desperate, Catherine observed during our weekly update call, amusement evident in her voice. Have you seen his girlfriend's latest social media posts? Their situation has evolved. They're staying at her shared apartment now, with 2 roommates. Apparently, living on an intern's stipend isn't quite the glamorous escape he imagined. There's a particularly revealing post where she complains about him using all the hot water and leaving his protein shake containers everywhere. I couldn't help but smile at the image of Trevor, who had complained about the limited closet space in our 3,000 square foot home, now trying to fit his extensive wardrobe into a shared apartment with 3 20-somethings. The most surprising development came when Trevor's family started reaching out, their tone markedly different from their initial accusations. Shame and embarrassment evident in every communication. We had no idea what was really happening, his sister Diane admitted during an unexpected visit to my boutique. She fingered an emerald silk scarf nervously as she spoke, not quite meeting my eyes. He told us you'd been cold, controlling, obsessed with your business, that he needed to escape a loveless marriage. But then we saw screenshots of his texts, the way he bragged about taking your money. That's not the brother I thought I knew. I'm a hospital administrator, I deal with ethics violations all the time, but I never thought I'd be apologizing for my own brother's behavior. Vivian called again 2 days later, her voice thick with tears. The things he said about your age, about replacing you with someone younger, about taking what you've built. I raised him better than that. I thought I did, anyway. As a teacher for 30 years, I tried to instill respect and honesty in my students and my children. To see Trevor behave this way. Her voice broke. His father would be so ashamed. I let most of their calls go to voicemail after that first round of apologies. Their support might have meant something weeks ago, but now it felt performative, like rats deserting a sinking ship. Their concern seemed more focused on their family's reputation than on the hurt Trevor had caused. Meanwhile, the boutique thrived, ironically boosted by local gossip about my situation. Women started coming in specifically to show support. The bell above the door chiming constantly with new customers. Many leaving with far more than they'd planned to buy. My designs were selling faster than I could produce them. My ex tried something similar, one customer confided while purchasing one of my signature dresses and 2 scarves. Thought he'd take everything in the divorce, including my catering business. Men like that never expect us to be smarter than them. Do they? I've been following your story through the grapevine. And let me tell you, you're an inspiration to all of us who've been underestimated. Her words warmed me more than I expected, creating a sense of connection and solidarity that helped ease the lingering pain of betrayal. My phone still buzzed occasionally with texts from Trevor, his tone swinging wildly between anger, manipulation, and increasingly desperate attempts at reconciliation as his Key West dreams crumbled in real time. You've ruined everything. Was that your plan all along? To humiliate me? I never meant to hurt you. Things just got out of hand. This isn't the real me. You'll regret being so vindictive when this is all over. You're showing your true colors. Can't we work something out? Maybe we rushed into this divorce thing. We have history together. That business would be nothing without my connections and support. Everyone knows I was the one who introduced you to the right people. I forwarded each message to Catherine without responding. The growing file of Trevor's mistakes building a case more damning than anything we could have constructed ourselves. Let him dig his hole deeper. With every self-incriminating word. Through mutual friends and Diane's increasingly candid updates, I heard Brittany was having serious second thoughts about their relationship. Apparently, sharing a cramped apartment with roommates and a middle-aged man who complained constantly about back pain wasn't the glamorous adventure she'd envisioned for her Instagram followers. The age gap that had seemed exciting during secret hotel meetings felt awkward and embarrassing when her friends came over and Trevor tried to use their slang or relate to their music choices. The designer clothes and luxury lifestyle he'd promised kept failing to materialize. She posted about toxic relationships and learning the difference between love and manipulation yesterday, Catherine mentioned during an update call, not bothering to hide her satisfaction. She's also removed all couple photos and changed her relationship status to "it's complicated" this morning. From a legal perspective, this is excellent for us. I almost felt sorry for Trevor as the fantasy he'd constructed collapsed around him. Almost. But then I remembered his cruel laugh that after telling me he'd emptied our account, the casual cruelty of his comments about my age and appearance, the way he'd assumed I'd be helpless and broken without him, the years of subtle undermining and dismissal of my work and dreams. Instead of pity, I felt something far more powerful blooming in my chest: pride. Pride in my foresight, in my quiet strength, in my ability to protect myself while he underestimated me. Pride in the business I built with my own hands and imagination. Pride in knowing that while he'd been planning his escape, I'd been preparing my future, a future that now stretched before me. The final divorce hearing painted a very different picture from Trevor's imagined triumph. Gone was his cocky attitude, replaced by barely concealed panic that made his face look drawn and gray. Brittany was noticeably absent. She'd moved on to a marketing assistant her own age, according to workplace gossip circulating through my networks. Trevor had shown up in his old clothes. The designer wardrobe apparently returned or sold to help repay the joint account he'd emptied. His hair was no longer artificially darkened, and the gray at his temples seemed to have spread overnight. His lawyer looked exhausted, fidgeting with his pen, probably from spending endless hours trying to find non-existent loopholes in my documented separation of assets. Your Honor, Trevor's lawyer attempted one last time, desperation creeping into his voice. Despite the separate property documentation, my client contributed significantly to the growth of his wife's business through moral support, business connections, and creative input on her designs. Moral support? Catherine interrupted, her voice sharp with controlled indignation. Like these text messages belittling Mrs. Winter's business as a little hobby shop? Or these social media posts where he refers to her designs as overpriced scarves? Or perhaps this email to his friend where he calls her boutique that expensive distraction she plays with while I do real work? She presented the evidence. With devastating precision, each document appearing on the courtroom display screens. With highlighted portions that made Trevor visibly flinch. Catherine continued, pulling out a leather-bound sketchbook. As for creative input, here are Mrs. Winter's design journals dating back to before their marriage, showing the development of her signature style, work that earned her the Nordals department store contract worth $175,000. That we've previously submitted as evidence. The judge, who had been reviewing documents throughout the proceedings, removed her glasses and leaned forward. She had clearly seen enough. Her voice carried the weight of finality as she announced the terms of the settlement. Based on the evidence presented, the court rules as follows. Mrs. Winters retains full ownership of her historical family home, her business including all intellectual property and assets, and her separate financial accounts. Mr. Winters receives his personal possessions, professional equipment, and his vehicle. She glanced down at her notes, which I understand carries a loan balance exceeding its current value. I felt a wave of relief wash over me, not because I had won something, but because I hadn't lost everything I'd worked for. The tension I'd been carrying in my shoulders for months finally began to ease. You've completely destroyed me, Trevor hissed as we left the courtroom. His face contorted with fury that couldn't mask the fear underneath. I'll have to move back in with my mother. At my age. Do you have any idea how humiliating that is? I looked directly into his eyes, seeing clearly for the first time the insecure man behind all the bravado. No, Trevor, you destroyed yourself. I just made sure you couldn't destroy me in the process. My voice was calm but firm, without the venom he clearly expected. Vivian was waiting outside, her face a mask of tight-lipped disappointment, ready to drive her middle-aged son to her house, his new home at 47. The irony of his situation wasn't lost on anyone in the courthouse hallway. The man who'd mocked my age and called me not getting any younger was now moving back into his childhood bedroom while I continued building my expanding design business. You planned this all along, he accused, desperation making his voice crack. You knew this would happen. You've been setting me up for years. No, I replied simply, smoothing the lapel of my self-designed jacket. I just paid attention to the warning signs. And unlike you, I understood the value of keeping good records and protecting what I built. My words weren't meant to wound, they were simply the truth. Vivian stepped between us, her former schoolteacher authority evident in her rigid posture. That's enough, Trevor. You've embarrassed yourself and this family quite enough already. The disappointment in her voice was palpable, making Trevor shrink visibly. As they walked away down the courthouse corridor, I heard her start in on him. Honestly, what were you thinking? A 22-year-old intern? Emptying joint bank accounts? Sending those horrible, cruel texts? Your father would be absolutely mortified by your behavior. I watched them disappear through the heavy doors, feeling not triumph, but a profound sense of relief spreading through me like warmth. Trevor had thought he was writing the dramatic ending to our story, with that cruel text message about my little hobby shop. Instead, he'd merely set my carefully laid contingency plans in motion. Plans I'd hoped never to need but was grateful to have prepared. My phone buzzed in my hand, not with texts from Trevor this time, but with notifications of new orders from my boutique's website and an email from the Nordals buyer requesting an expanded line for their spring catalog. Life was moving forward, just not in the direction Trevor had imagined for either of us. 6 months after the divorce was finalized, my boutique had expanded to a second location in the city's upscale shopping district, with my own designs now occupying the central display area. The sleek sign reading, Elaine Winters Designs, glowed softly above the entrance. A physical manifestation of my evolution from retailer to creator. The irony wasn't lost on me each morning as I unlocked the doors. while Trevor struggled to rebuild any semblance of stability. The little hobby shop he'd dismissed was thriving beyond my own expectations. I'd hired 3 new employees, including a talented young seamstress to help with production, and launched an online store that was gaining traction nationally, with features in 2 major fashion blogs. My heart swelled with pride each time I walked through the boutique, touching the fabrics I'd selected, seeing customers admiring designs that had once been mere sketches in my grandmother's old desk. This success felt different, deeper somehow, because it was entirely my own. News of Trevor's situation trickled back through mutual acquaintances, creating a picture of a man desperately trying to reclaim his former status. He tried several dating apps but found women his age weren't interested in a middle-aged man living with his mother, nursing wounds of self-inflicted financial ruin. Younger women, having heard about his history through industry gossip, and Brittany's not-so-subtle TikTok videos about dating red flags, steered clear with remarkable unanimity. Brittany had apparently warned her entire social network about him, sharing screenshots of his increasingly desperate attempts to win her back after she'd ended things. Messages that oscillated between blame and begging. His career had suffered significant damage too. The company's HR department had launched an investigation into his relationship with Brittany, a subordinate in turn, resulting in a formal reprimand and permanent note in his personnel file. The promotion he'd been confidently expecting went to someone else, a woman who'd been at the company less time, but who didn't have a history of inappropriate relationships with young staff members. He tried to claim age discrimination, Diane told me during an unexpected visit to the boutique, absently running her fingers along a display of my new silk scarves. Said they were punishing him for dating someone younger. HR just added that complaint to his file and suggested he might want to consult the company's ethics guidelines again. She shook her head. The professional hospital administrator in her clearly appalled by her brother's lack of judgment. I was surprised to see Trevor's sister in my store, but her presence spoke volumes about how thoroughly he had alienated his own family with his behavior and continued refusal to take responsibility. I know we didn't support you at first, she admitted, selecting a teal scarf that complemented her eyes and draping it experimentally around her neck. He played the victim so convincingly, with that charm he's always had. But seeing how he handled everything, how he acted afterward, the things he said about you. She met my eyes directly. Professional dignity momentarily giving way to genuine remorse. I'm ashamed we ever believed him. As a healthcare administrator, I should know better than to accept one side of a story without evidence. Catherine kept me updated on Trevor's continued attempts to challenge the divorce settlement, each more desperate than the last. Each petition was swiftly denied. His claim of unfair distribution dismissed based on the overwhelming evidence of his own actions and words. He actually tried arguing that his text about emptying the account was just a joke, and that the proved his humorous intent, she told me over lunch. Unable to contain her professional amusement, the judge asked if he believed adding to an admission of theft somehow made it less illegal. The courtroom actually laughed. The boutique's success brought unexpected validation beyond financial rewards. Local business magazines wanted to feature my story not as a scorned wife, but as a savvy businesswoman and designer who'd protected her interests while building something valuable. Young female entrepreneurs began seeking me out, asking for advice about keeping business and personal finances separate, about protecting their creative work. The best protection is preparation, I told one young woman who reminded me of Brittany. With the same eager ambition but perhaps more substance. Document everything and always trust your instincts when something feels wrong. They're usually right. Vivian called occasionally, usually after Trevor had done something particularly self-destructive in his quest to reclaim his former lifestyle. He'd tried online sports betting, convinced he had a system that would quickly solve his financial problems. He'd gotten involved with a cryptocurrency investment scheme that promised impossible returns. Each attempt to find a shortcut to his former Comfort level only dug him deeper into trouble. I don't know where we went wrong with him, she sighed during one call. Her former teacher's confidence replaced by maternal confusion. His father and I offered to help him get back on his feet if he'd just take responsibility for his actions and get some counseling. But he's still blaming everyone else, you, Brittany, his company, the judge, even me for not supporting him properly. I listened politely but maintained my emotional distance. Their family dynamics weren't my concern anymore, and I had my own life to focus on. My world had moved forward in ways I'd never anticipated, filled with plans for a third boutique location and a carefully considered expansion into luxury accessories that complemented my clothing designs. The only remaining reminder of Trevor's impact on my life was a framed screenshot hanging in my office, his final text before I blocked his number. Have fun with your little hobby shop. At least it'll keep you busy in your old age. Below it sat my latest business award and the framed Nordals contract. Tangible proof that sometimes the best revenge isn't planning elaborate payback, it's simply succeeding brilliantly on your own terms. 1 year after the divorce, I hosted a grand opening celebration for my third boutique location, this one featuring an expanded studio space where customers could watch designers at work and even commission custom pieces. The champagne flowed as fashion bloggers and local media circulated through the elegant space, admiring the fall collection displayed on mannequins I'd personally styled. What struck me most was that the story they wanted to tell wasn't about my failed marriage, it was about a successful designer expanding her brand and bringing a unique aesthetic to the market. Trevor's betrayal had become a mere footnote in my success story, if it was mentioned at all. My heart nearly stopped when, during the event, Brittany unexpectedly walked in. She looked younger than ever in her trendy outfit, or maybe I just felt that much stronger and more confident in my own skin. She shifted uncomfortably as our eyes met across the room, clutching her purse like a shield against the awkwardness of the moment. I owe you an apology, she said quietly when she finally approached, the upbeat music nearly drowning out her words. I believed everything Trevor told me about how you were cold, controlling, how you didn't support his ambitions or understand his vision. Then I saw him try the same manipulation tactics on me when things got tough and money got tight. Her eyes held genuine regret. That made her seem older, more substantial than the girl who had once laughed too loudly at Trevor's jokes. I continued arranging a display of designer sunglasses, giving my hands something to do as unexpected emotions surfaced. Those weren't ambitions or visions, Brittany. They were fantasies and escapes. There's a significant difference between dreaming and doing. The words weren't meant to be cruel, just honest. I know that now, she paused, then added with surprising insight. He tried to move in permanently when you froze the accounts. Thought my apartment with roommates would just be temporary until his big plans materialized. After 2 weeks of him complaining about the size of my closet, leaving his expensive skincare products everywhere, and suggesting I take out a loan for a bigger place that he couldn't contribute to, I finally understood what you meant about the difference between dreams and escapes. I actually laughed at that, a genuine sound of shared understanding between two women who'd learned the same lesson about the same man. Let me guess, he had big plans, but no way to actually fund them? No concrete steps beyond vague promises? Exactly. Her eyes widened in recognition. Everything was going to magically work out once his investments paid off, once he got that promotion he was definitely in line for, once his cryptocurrency absolutely increased in value. It was all talk and credit cards. She shook her head, then added with unexpected maturity. I'm dating someone my own age now. We have student loans and a cramped apartment with mismatched furniture. But at least we're building something real together, one step at a time. After she left, clutching one of my signature scarves that she'd purchased despite my offer to give it to her, my assistant manager whispered. Was that her? The infamous girlfriend? No, I replied, watching Brittany's retreating figure with unexpected compassion. That was just another woman who learned the same lesson I did. just at a much younger age. Speaking of lessons, I turned my attention to a young couple examining our designer handbags with obvious appreciation. Let's talk about your idea for expanding our accessories line with those leather goods you proposed. I think you might be onto something special there. The boutique had become more than just a business selling beautiful things. It had evolved into a symbol of independence, of resilience, of the power of preparation meeting opportunity. Young entrepreneurs, particularly women, often sought my advice, and I always emphasized the importance of protecting their creative assets and trusting their instincts when something felt wrong in business or relationships. Vivian called one last time, not to discuss Trevor's latest schemes, but to thank me in a way I never expected. You taught our entire family an important lesson, she said, her teacher's voice steady but humbled. About enabling bad behavior. About making excuses for cruelty just because it comes from someone we love. Trevor is still living at home, still blaming everyone else for his problems. But we're no longer defending him or making excuses. That's your unintended legacy to our family, showing us the crucial difference between supporting someone and enabling their worst instincts. I reflected on that unexpected legacy as I reviewed architectural plans for a fourth location. That would include a dedicated design studio. Trevor had intended to diminish me, to trade me in for a younger model and take half of everything I'd built through years of dedication. Instead, he'd inadvertently pushed me to become even stronger, more focused, more successful than I might have been had. He's simply been a decent partner. My phone buzzed with a text from Catherine. Trevor filed another petition to revisit the settlement, claiming new evidence of his contributions. Judge dismissed it within 15 minutes and ordered him to pay all court costs, plus our legal fees. Thought you'd enjoy that little update. I smiled, thinking of him in his childhood bedroom, still trying desperately to rewrite an ending that had been determined the moment he underestimated not just me, but the consequences of his own actions. As I traced my fingers over a new fabric sample that had just arrived for next season's collection, I realized that sometimes the best revenge isn't about getting even with someone who hurt you, it's about getting better, growing beyond what they thought possible, and creating a life more beautiful than they could ever imagine. 2 years after Trevor's cruel text message shattered our marriage, I stood nervously backstage at the International Fashion Business Conference in Chicago, reviewing my speaking notes one last time. My heart pounded against my ribs as I heard the moderator introducing me to the packed audience. The invitation to deliver the keynote address had come. As a complete surprise, the topic wasn't divorce or betrayal, or even resilience, it was about building and protecting a creative business in a competitive market. My story had evolved from a whispered cautionary tale to a source of inspiration for entrepreneurs across the country. It gives me great pleasure to introduce our keynote speaker, Elaine Winters, founder and head designer of Elaine Winters Designs, whose unique approach to both fashion and business security has created one of the fastest-growing brands in the industry. As I stepped onto the stage, the lights momentarily blinding me, I felt an overwhelming surge of gratitude. The journey from that devastating text message to this podium had been transformative in ways I could never have imagined. During the Q&A session after my talk, a woman in crisp business attire rose, her expression troubled. "I'm starting a consulting firm, and my husband thinks I'm being paranoid about keeping our finances separate. He says I'm being untrusting. That marriage means sharing everything completely." I felt a flash of recognition so strong it nearly took my breath away. The microphone felt cool against my fingertips as I composed my response. "My ex-husband said those exact same words," I replied, making eye contact with her. "Right up until he tried to claim half my business in our divorce, calling the designs I'd created joint marital assets." Trust your instincts. Protecting what you build isn't paranoia, it's good business sense and self-preservation. The right partner will understand that boundaries and clarity benefit everyone. I watched her shoulders relax as she nodded, writing something in her notebook. Another seed planted, another woman potentially spared what I'd endured. The boutique chain had grown to 5 locations across 3 states, each more successful than the last. The little hobby shop Trevor had mockingly dismissed now employed 30 people, including 6 designers trained under my mentorship program, and had been featured in several national fashion magazines. My latest collection had been highlighted in Vogue as bringing accessible elegance to American wardrobes, a phrase that still made me smile with disbelief when I saw it framed on my office wall. Through mutual friends and the occasional update from Diane, I heard Trevor had finally moved out of his mother's house into a small apartment above a garage belonging to a former colleague who felt sorry for him. He'd had to take a lower-paying position at a smaller tech company after his former employer downsized, strategically eliminating his position during a department restructuring that somehow managed to retain everyone but him. His LinkedIn profile still boasted of his visionary approach to product development, though his accomplishments section hadn't been updated in years. His dating profile on several apps still listed him as young at heart and financially stable, though his profile photo was clearly outdated by at least 5 years, showing him in better days before stress and disappointment had deepened the lines around his eyes. In one of life's more delicious ironies, Brittany had become a regular customer at my original boutique location, often bringing clients from her newly established social media marketing consultancy. She'd completed her business degree with honors and launched a company specializing in authentic brand development for small businesses, the antithesis of the shallow image cultivation Trevor had practiced. "You inspired me in ways you probably don't even realize," she told me once while selecting a dress for an important client presentation. "You showed me how a woman can build something real and lasting instead of falling for empty promises and Instagram fantasies. My business model is basically, what would Elaine do, with a Gen Z twist?" Her words touched me deeply, creating a sense of purpose beyond my own success. In my main office, centrally located between all 5 boutiques, I kept Trevor's cruel text message framed on the wall, not as a reminder of pain or a monument to victimhood, but as tangible proof of how far I'd come and how profoundly wrong one person's assessment could be. Below it hung a custom-made sign in elegant script that read, "Success isn't the best revenge, it's the best path forward." The women I now mentored often asked about that framed text, and I shared my story openly, and not to vilify Trevor, but to illustrate how underestimation can become the fuel for extraordinary growth if channeled properly. At the 5-year anniversary celebration of my original boutique, now rebranded as Second Chapter, the flagship of Elaine Winters Designs, I stood addressing my employees, loyal customers, and fashion industry representatives. My voice was strong and clear, carrying to every corner of the transformed space that had evolved from a single little shop into the cornerstone of an international brand, with boutiques in New York and plans for London the following year. The celebration showcased my journey through fashion, from my earliest designs, displayed in museum-like cases, to the current collection modeled by diverse women of all ages. The physical space symbolized my philosophy. Beauty and strength aren't limited by age or circumstance, but enhanced by experience and resilience. As I finished my speech about my journey from local boutique to recognized brand, I noticed Vivian in the audience, though I hadn't invited her. She looked elegant in one of my designs, a navy dress with subtle structural details that flattered her figure. She waited patiently until the crowd thinned before approaching me, her expression difficult to read. "I hope you don't mind my coming," she said, smoothing her dress with hands that showed her age more than her carefully maintained appearance. "I wanted to see what Trevor threw away, to understand better." She paused, gathering her thoughts. "I saw him yesterday at a family dinner. He was talking about his glory days, about the life he deserved and should have had, spinning grand tales about opportunities just around the corner." Her eyes met mine directly. "He still doesn't understand, even after all this time, that he didn't lose everything. In the divorce, he threw it away with both hands. The same way he threw away every advantage he ever had." I felt a complicated mix of emotions, compassion for a mother seeing Her son's fundamental flaws, satisfaction at the vindication, and a surprising lack of bitterness toward the man who had once tried to destroy me. The name of this place, Vivian continued, gesturing to the second chapter sign. It's perfect. Not just for you, but for the women who come here looking for transformation. Not just clothes. Her eyes grew bright with unshed tears. Including me. I thought about that devastating text message years ago, Trevor's casual cruelty. His absolute certainty that I would crumble without him, how he'd expected me to beg. To break, to prove him right about my desperation and worthlessness beyond being his wife. Instead, I'd built something far stronger and more meaningful than before. Crafting a legacy that extended beyond fashion to the women I'd employed, mentored, and inspired. Each boutique location was a testament to what women could achieve when they stopped dimming their light for insecure partners. When they trusted their instincts, when they protected what they built. The second chapter foundation I'd established provided grants and mentoring for women rebuilding after divorce or domestic abuse, helping them create their own second chapters. As Vivian moved away to examine a display of my newest designs, a young saleswoman approached, coincidentally also named Brittany, with a question about the new inventory and mentorship system I'd implemented. As I explained the process, pointing out features on the tablet we used for tracking both inventory and designer development, I caught a glimpse of my reflection in the store window. What I saw made me pause mid-sentence, truly seeing myself perhaps for the first time in years, not just a businesswoman or designer, but a whole person who had transformed pain into purpose. I saw what Trevor had failed to see 5 years ago, not a woman getting older and less valuable, but one growing wiser, stronger, more creative, more impactful with each passing year. His cruel text message had been intended as an ending, a final dismissal of my worth, as I aged out of his narrow definition of value. Instead, it had become a beginning, not just for me and my designs, but for every woman who heard my story and recognized their own worth beyond someone else's limited perception, who realized they deserved more than being collateral damage in someone else's midlife crisis. As I turned back to young Brittany, continuing my explanation with renewed purpose, I knew with absolute certainty that the best second chapters aren't about revenge or even vindication, they're stepping fully into who you were always meant to be, without shrinking to accommodate someone else's smallness. I am Mandy Simpson, 42 years old. I used to have a family of 3, my husband and my son. My son, Nathan, was my treasure. I raised him with all the love I had. But now, my heart is frozen. Because I was betrayed by my husband and my son. I married James in my 20s. Back then, James was kind. Mandy, will you marry me? I'll cherish you forever. Yes. I believe I can be happy with you, James. Our newlywed life was wonderful. But after Nathan was born, James' attitude started to change. You're a stay-at-home mom, so do all the housework. At first, I thought he was joking. But he was serious. Housework and childcare, all of it became my responsibility. James used work as an excuse and showed no interest in raising our child. That's a mother's job, isn't it? I endured it. For my son. When Nathan was little, he was so affectionate. Mommy, I love you. Back then, he was my emotional support. But as he grew up, he started resembling his father. By the time he got to high school, our conversations had faded. And he wouldn't even look at me. Mom, you're annoying. Just leave me alone. No matter how much I tried to talk to him, he only responded coldly. After he went to college, he barely contacted me. I felt lonely, but I still believed in my son. He will change once he enters society. That's what I kept telling myself. And then, Nathan's wedding was decided. Congratulations! What kind of wedding will it be? A simple ceremony with just close family. Of course, I thought I would be invited. But when I received the invitation, my name wasn't on it. Only James had been invited. Inside the envelope, there was just one sentence. It's a private family-only ceremony. What? Am I not family? When I confronted James, he smirked and said, "Just stay home and clean the house, old lady." My mind went blank. Up until the day before the wedding, I kept trying to convince myself. It must be a mistake. I still wished for my son's happiness. So, at the very least, I wanted to bless him in my heart. But James acted as if nothing had happened. He hummed a tune while preparing his suit, looking excited. "Hey, are you really sure I shouldn't go? You're so persistent. You're not family." I had no words left. The next morning, all I could do was continue my chores and let time pass. I was sad, yet no tears came. On the day of the wedding, it had already been 5 hours since my husband left the house. No matter what I did, I felt empty inside. This is for the best, right? I kept telling myself that. Even cleaning, even turning on the TV, nothing could distract me. The more I tried not to think, the more restless I felt. As time passed, all I felt was emptiness and resignation. I could still clearly remember James walking out of the house. Wearing his suit proudly, he walked out the door. And I was left alone. Then, 6 hours passed. Suddenly, my phone rang. I gasped. Who could it be? Anxiety and anger mixed within me. Could it be James? Or Nathan? I reached for my phone and hesitantly looked at the screen. 219 missed calls. The caller was Nathan. What happened? But I didn't answer. Should I pick up or ignore it? Then, I remembered everything they had done to me. Nathan, who said I wasn't a family and left me behind. Why was he calling me now? Did something go wrong because I wasn't there? Or was this just an apology? Either way, it was too late. I quietly put my phone down. Ping. A message arrived. Is this Mandy Simpson? Your son's wedding is in chaos right now. The sender was Ryan Harrison. He was a classmate from my high school days. We had gone our separate ways after graduation and never kept in touch. Why was he involved in my son's wedding? Ryan? I gripped my phone tightly and exhaled slowly. Should I find out what happened? Or should I just ignore it? But there was one thing I knew for sure. I was no longer the same person I used to be. Still holding my phone tightly, I stared at the screen. For a while, I couldn't move. Ryan Harrison, my old classmate. I hadn't seen him since high school. Why was he at my son's wedding? Unease and confusion tightened around my chest. Determined, I opened the message. Hey, it's been a while. Sorry for the sudden message. Something crazy is happening at your son's wedding right now. What happened? The groom's family made some awful comments about an absent guest. That absent guest is you, right? I caught my breath. I didn't know what had happened. But a storm of emotions swirled inside me. Anyway, the whole venue is in chaos right now. I need to talk to you. Can you call me? I hesitated. Should I call him? Or should I ignore it? But then, something welled up inside me. It was anger. I clenched my phone tightly. Took a deep breath. And pressed the call button. Mandy? Ryan, it's been a long time. It's really been a long time. I never thought I'd be contacting you like this. What's happening right now? Ryan let out a sigh and began speaking calmly. Right before the ceremony started, the bride's relatives started asking why the groom's mother wasn't there. In response, someone from the groom's side said, "Who cares about the mother?" That made the bride's family furious. What? I couldn't believe it. My son had chosen not to invite me. But now, my absence was causing chaos at his wedding? The bride's parents said, "We can't be part of a family that's so heartless." And they tried to take the bride away. Now, the groom, your son, is desperately trying to stop them. I was stunned. My absence had turned into a major issue at the wedding. Yet, I was here, at home. Ryan, what's happening at the venue now? It's a disaster. The bride's mother is crying. The bride's father is shouting. And your husband, James, he doesn't seem to understand the situation. He actually said, a wedding can happen without women. I instinctively closed my eyes. The moment he said that, the bride's father lost it. He yelled, I'm not letting my daughter marry into a family like this. And then, the bride started crying. And said, I feel so bad for my mother-in-law. I don't want to marry into this family. The moment I heard those words, I took a deep breath. What about my son? He's completely pale. He's desperately trying to convince the bride's family. But no one is listening. Right now, he's completely isolated. I gripped my phone tightly. I thought about everything I had endured. All the pain I had suffered. And now, all of it was finally coming back to my son. I answered quietly. Ryan. Thank you. Are you going? No. I'm not. With that, I ended the call. I set my phone down and took a deep, deep breath. This was my decision. No matter how much my son regretted it, I wasn't going back. I looked out the window. When I opened it, a quiet breeze brushed against my cheek. It felt as if the wind was affirming my choice. How much regret was my son feeling? How foolish was my husband's remark? How much did the bride and her family care about me? All of these thoughts swirled in my mind. It's over. I murmured to myself. For years, I had dedicated myself to my family. As a stay-at-home mother, I had supported my husband and son. And yet, they had treated me as if I was disposable. And now, that decision was coming back to haunt them. My phone kept ringing. Call after call from Nathan. More and more messages on Messenger. Mom, please. Pick up the phone. If you don't come, the wedding will be ruined. Mom, I'm sorry. I was really wrong. I stared at the screen with cold eyes. After all the cruelty they showed me, an apology now wouldn't change anything. Another message arrived. The bride's parents are considering calling off the engagement. Mom, are you really not coming? Please, help me. I put my phone down. I had no obligation to help. A wedding is a major life event. On that important day, I was told, you're not needed. Then, they should take responsibility for that decision. After a while, my phone buzzed again. The caller was Ryan. Hello? You're really not coming, huh?
Yeah,
I respect their choice. I see. But you've really become strong. I smiled at his words. Thank you, Ryan. I'm not going to be held back by the past anymore. The sky outside was a calm, clear blue. I had decided to move forward. But then, my phone rang again. This time, an unknown number. I hesitated. I had never received so many calls before. Just as I was about to answer, a notification popped up. Mrs. Mandy Simpson, I would like to speak with you. I am the bride's mother. The bride's mother? Why? I opened the message, still in shock. I know how important you are. Can we meet? I was speechless. No one had ever said something like that to me before. All this time, I had been treated as unnecessary by my own family. But maybe I had been wrong about that. I took a deep breath and stared at my phone. Should I look back on my past? Or should I take a step forward into something new? I gripped my phone tightly, thinking. Then, I glanced out the window. In the distance, I heard the laughter of children. Their voices used to give me strength. But now, I feel nothing. Would I stay here forever? Or would I reach for a new future? The bride's mother. Those words echoed in my mind over and over. Slowly, I picked up my phone. And began typing a reply. Just then, my phone buzzed again. This time, it was a message from the bride herself. Mrs. Simpson, I want to meet you. I want you to know how important you are. I reread the message in disbelief. A woman I had never met cared about me this much. And yet, my own family. Finally, I made my decision. I picked up my phone and sent a reply. The silence of the room felt comforting. I had spent my whole life sacrificing for my family. But now, things were different. There were people who valued me. Maybe it was okay for me to take a new step forward. I looked at my phone again, deep in thought. I glanced at the clock. How many hours had passed? Was the wedding over? Or was it still trapped in chaos? It no longer mattered to me. For the first time in a long while, I felt a hint of excitement about the future. I stared at the message from the bride's mother, unable to move for a moment. She had never met me. And yet, she cared about me this much. Did she know how coldly I had been treated by my own family? Or was it just a matter of politeness? Doubt crept into my mind. I had spent my entire life for my family. And yet, they had cast me aside. Should I really meet the bride's mother? Another notification arrived. I would be grateful if you could reply whenever you have time. I would like to talk about how important you are. I decided to reply to the bride's mother. Thank you. Could you let me know when you are available to meet? The moment I pressed send, my phone vibrated again. This time, it was a message from the bride herself. I want to meet you too. I want to know what kind of person you are, mother-in-law. Unlike my son, who had rejected me, she valued my existence. Was this really happening? A few minutes later, another message arrived from the bride's mother, suggesting a meeting place. Would you be able to meet tomorrow afternoon at XX Cafe? Only if it's convenient for you. I stared at the message. Was it really okay for me to go? But something inside me told me that things were about to change. Understood. I will be there tomorrow. After sending the message, I felt a weight lift off my heart for the first time in a long while. The next day, I headed to the cafe. Stepping outside after so long, the fresh air felt refreshing. When was the last time I felt this free? Upon arriving at the cafe, I saw the bride's mother waiting at the entrance. She greeted me with a warm smile. You must be Mrs. Simpson. I'm so glad to meet you. I nodded slightly, feeling nervous. We took our seats, and she slowly began to speak. First of all, I want to apologize. Huh? You should have been at that wedding. But by the time we realized, the ceremony had already started. Her words surprised me. It's not that we took your presence lightly. If anything, the current situation has proven just how important you are. I couldn't say anything. My daughter also wants to meet you. She wants to know more about you. I felt warmth rising in my chest. The people who rejected me were my own family. Yet, these strangers were trying to accept me. Thank you. The bride's mother smiled gently. At that moment, I was certain. I no longer needed to be trapped in the past. It was time to move forward with my life. I reflected on everything. I had dedicated myself to my family. And yet, they had abandoned me. But that wasn't everything. I had found new connections. Maybe it was okay to live for those who truly cared about me. Slowly, I spoke. If it's all right, could I also meet your daughter? Of course. I'm sure she'd be delighted. I nodded quietly at her words. I felt as if a new future was unfolding before me. Then, I realized something. I had always lived thinking about whether others needed me. But maybe what truly mattered was how I wanted to live. Where would this new connection lead me? To find out, I decided to take a step forward. After our conversation at the cafe, I felt lighter than I had in a long time. I'm really glad I came. And we're so happy to have met you. Her words felt as if they came from an old friend. Meeting them had been the greatest salvation for me. As I stepped outside, the air was cool. For the first time in a long while, I felt at peace. But it wasn't over yet. When I got home, I found dozens of missed calls on my phone. All from Nathan. Mom, I'm really sorry. I want to talk to you. Please give me another chance. I stared at the screen for a while. A message had also arrived from the bride. Mother, Nathan deeply regrets everything. He wants to change. I sighed. It was too late. He never acknowledged me as his mother. He didn't even invite me to his wedding. And only now, after losing everything, did he finally realize my worth? More than anger, I just felt exhausted. I put my phone down and closed my eyes. Then, another message arrived. This time, from my husband. Let's talk when I get home. Think about this for Nathan's sake. The man who had always looked down on me was now trying to reach out. But it was too late. I picked up my phone and blocked Nathan's number. Without reading my husband's message, I deleted it. I would no longer let them control my life. I would live for myself. That night, another message arrived from the bride's mother. Mrs. Simpson, if you're willing, we'd love to have you as part of our family. Tears welled up in my eyes. Blood didn't determine the true family. It was the people who truly cared that made a family. I smiled softly and typed my reply. Thank you. I feel the same way. I pressed send. For the first time, I felt truly free. The next morning, I woke up early. It had been a long time since I felt so refreshed. I opened the curtains. And the sunlight filled my room. The heaviness in my heart had completely disappeared. What should I do now? I thought to myself. I had lived for my family until now. But from now on, it was time to live for myself. I opened my phone and found another message from the bride's mother. If you'd like, would you like to have a meal together sometime? I would love to. Just then, the doorbell rang. Surprised, I peeked through the door's peephole. Standing there was Nathan. Mom, please, hear me out. I can't do this without you. I was wrong. His voice trembled. But I had already made my decision. It's too late. I whispered through the door. No. Nathan's tearful voice reached my ears. I closed my eyes. This was the consequence of his choices. Without hesitation, I turned my back on him. And moved forward toward my new future. My life belonged to me. But the journey ahead was not without challenges. The scandal surrounding Nathan and James had become public. And the way people looked at them began to change. At work, some colleagues whispered about it behind their backs. But I refused to be shaken by those voices. Instead of focusing on those who tried to bring me down, I chose to surround myself with those who supported me. The bride's mother reached out to me. Mrs. Simpson, are you okay? I've been hearing rumors. Don't worry about it. It's in the past, and I'm moving forward with my life. But it's not like you did anything wrong. Thank you. Just hearing that is enough for me. You're truly a strong woman. But don't push yourself too hard. If you ever need anything, please rely on me. Of course. That night, I casually checked social media. There, I found a new post from James. It wasn't all my fault. Mandy is the reason our family fell apart. He still refused to take responsibility. Still tried to drag my name through the mud. But the comments told a different story. You got what you deserved. Don't act like the victim when you're the one who ruined everything. Mandy looks way happier without you. There was almost no support for him. His world was fading into the past. And what about Nathan? Even after his engagement was broken off, he struggled to hold a steady job. Wherever he went, he failed to earn people's trust. In the end, he drifted from one short-term job to another. One day, I happened to hear about his situation. A mutual acquaintance told me that Nathan had started working night shifts. He used to be so proud of himself. What happened to him, they asked. But it no longer had anything to do with me. Nathan, who once boasted, "I will definitely succeed," was now alone, unwanted. And falling into obscurity. Yet, I felt nothing. This was the path he had chosen. This is how it should be, right? I murmured to myself, but deep down, I was certain. I was no longer bound by the past. I was free. With the support of the bride's mother and her family, I had begun a new life where I was finally able to value myself. But there was one person who refused to accept that, James. One day, while I was out in town, I unexpectedly ran into him. He still wore a suit, but his face looked weary. "Hey, Mandy." I ignored him and tried to walk away, but James grabbed my arm. "Wait a minute. You're getting too full of yourself, aren't you? Let go of me. You humiliated me. Because you didn't show up to Nathan's wedding. His in-laws insulted us. And now, Nathan's engagement is ruined. So? What? I wasn't invited, was I? Then why is it my fault?" James gritted his teeth. "Women like you should just stay at home and keep quiet. Nathan even apologized to you, and yet you won't forgive him?" I looked at James with cold eyes. "I am not your tool." "A tool? Don't be ridiculous." People around us started whispering. "Hey, is that guy yelling at his wife?" James must have realized that people were staring. He looked around awkwardly and lowered his voice. "Listen, come home. I'll forgive you. That's a joke, right? You need me." I laughed scornfully. "The only one who thinks that is you." James bit his lip, his face turning red with anger. "Don't mess with me. You have no idea how much I put up with." Put up with? Which one of us was actually enduring everything? I yanked my arm away and started walking. But then. "She's cheating on me." James suddenly screamed. I stopped in my tracks. He shouted loudly to the people around him. "She's my wife, but she's seeing another man. While I'm suffering, she's out here enjoying herself." I was truly appalled. But now, all eyes were on me. James smirked triumphantly, as if he had won. "That's right, Mandy. You care about what people think, don't you? So, what are you gonna do now?" "All right, then. Show me the proof." "What? You accused me of cheating, didn't you? Then show me proof." James faltered. "You're just making a scene for no reason." "I haven't done anything wrong." The people around us began to glare at him. "You don't have any proof? That's defamation, you know." I stepped closer to him and spoke quietly. "Do you realize how pathetic you look right now? Ugh. Lying just to ruin my reputation? That's truly pitiful." James clenched his fists, his face burning with rage. "You'll regret this, I swear." "We'll see about that." I turned on my heel and walked away, leaving James behind. I could hear his frustrated voice behind me, but I no longer cared. This was his true nature. I was on the right path. I kept walking until I found a nearby cafe. After ordering a coffee, I sat by the window. "Hey, this isn't over yet." I turned around. Standing at the entrance was James. His eyes filled with anger and desperation. I stood up calmly. "This has nothing to do with you anymore. Don't mess with me. You think you can just be happy without my permission?" "Your permission? You must be joking." The other customers in the cafe started to notice the commotion. I stood my ground. "I am not your property. This is over." James clenched his fists. But something in my unwavering gaze must have stopped him. He clicked his tongue and stormed out of the cafe. I thought I had put this behind me. But things only escalated further. The next day, my phone was flooded with dozens of missed calls from an unknown number. My social media accounts were swarmed with hateful messages from anonymous accounts. Cheating woman. A terrible mother who abandoned her son. The woman who destroyed her own family. I clenched my phone, shaking with anger. "James, this is you, isn't it?" I hadn't expected him to go this far. But I wasn't about to lose. That day, I had planned to meet the bride's mother. Hoping to calm myself, I headed to the cafe and took a seat. "Mrs. Simpson." The bride's mother sat down and immediately took my hand, concerned in her eyes. What happened? With a sigh, I showed her my phone. Her eyes widened, and she bit her lip. This is awful. I'm not surprised. He would do something like this without doubt. She was silent for a moment, deep in thought, before looking at me seriously. Are you just going to let this go? No. I'm going to fight. Then I'll help you. But this is my problem. No, you're already an important part of our family. Tears welled up in my eyes. I wasn't alone anymore. That day, I went to a lawyer's office. With the bride's mother. We started gathering evidence to prepare for legal action. To prove James' harassment, I saved screenshots of his social media posts and my call logs. This is legally serious. The lawyer analyzed everything with a calm expression. This falls under defamation, harassment, and stalking laws. We have a solid case. Please proceed. A few days later, I received a message from Nathan. Mom, please stop this. So now he's getting desperate. James also tried calling me, but I ignored it. Then, a message arrived. Mandy, please, just hear me out. I was wrong. Forgive me. It's too late. If they wanted to destroy me, I would make sure they faced the consequences. You started this. Shortly after, the bride's mother contacted me. Mrs. Simpson, have you seen the news? I quickly opened a news site. And there it was. Corporate executive exposed for defamation, victim takes legal action. James' company name was written clearly in the article. This is your reckoning. On social media, his actions were spreading like wildfire. This guy is the worst. He ruined his own life by treating his wife terribly. He got exactly what he deserved. His company's website was flooded with criticism. And his name skyrocketed in search rankings. No matter how much they regretted it. I would never go back to the past. The battle had already begun. His company's reputation plummeted, and he was soon placed on suspension. But it didn't end there. One day, I received a call from an unknown number. Hesitantly, I answered. A deep male voice spoke. Is this Mrs. Mandy Simpson? I need to speak with you. Yes. I am the legal representative for James Simpson. We have a matter to discuss. A bad feeling crept over me. Mr. Simpson intends to hold you accountable for defamation and damages to his company. Me? He claims he is the real victim in this situation. I held my breath. Even after everything, he was still trying to paint himself as the victim. I only made public the truth. I have already retained legal counsel for the defamation and harassment I suffered from him. Even so, Mr. Simpson plans to file a lawsuit against you. Are you saying he wants to take this to court? That possibility exists. So it's not over yet. That night, I received a call from the bride's mother. Mrs. Simpson, are you all right? Yes, but it seems like he still hasn't given up. We'll support you. You don't have to carry this burden alone. Her warm words sank deep into my heart. The next day, I met with my lawyer again to discuss our strategy. If this goes to trial, the opposing side will have to provide evidence. But we have solid proof on our side. What is he trying to achieve? Most likely, he's hoping you'll back down. I won't let him control me anymore. A few days later, news broke that James had been officially fired from his company. Corporate scandal, James Simpson loses his job. I stared at my phone. His final act of resistance was coming to an end. But the situation was still not completely over. That night, my apartment's intercom suddenly rang. Feeling uneasy, I checked the monitor. There stood James, his face gaunt and hollow. Mandy, please, let me talk to you. I'm begging you. The once arrogant man now looked completely miserable. What do you want? It's all over. I lost my job. I have no money, you're the only one I have left. This is the result of your own actions. Don't say that. Let's start over. Go home. Please, Mandy. James banged desperately on my door. But my mind has never changed. I have nothing left to give you. James collapsed to the ground. I would never be bound by the past again. After he left, I was surprised by how calm I felt. Was the world always this peaceful without him in it? But this wasn't the end. The next day, I visited my lawyer's office and officially decided to proceed with my lawsuit against James. Mrs. Simpson, the opposing side has proposed a settlement. Would you be willing to consider it? No. I will fight this to the end. Then we'll proceed with the legal process. A few weeks later, the trial began. James desperately tried to make excuses. But he was powerless against the evidence I had presented. The harassment, defamation, and stalking committed by Mr. Simpson, all of these have been recorded as evidence. Do you have any rebuttal? James sat there, head down, unable to say a word. I have won the lawsuit. James was ordered to pay substantial damages and was legally prohibited from contacting me ever again. As my life moved forward, James and Nathan continued their downward spiral. One day, a colleague at work mentioned that my son had become a topic of discussion online. Curious, I searched for his name on my phone. What I found was shocking. Former elite candidate falls into ruin after family breakdown. Desperate for money, turns to shady business practices. The article detailed how Nathan, now struggling financially, had resorted to unethical ways to make money. It also exposed the trouble he had caused at his previous jobs. Meanwhile, James' situation was no better. He continued to post online, trying to justify himself and slander me. But the public's response was cold. It was full of comments criticizing him. To make matters worse, a former colleague publicly exposed his past misconduct. With that, James lost whatever little credibility he had left. I'm not the bad guy. I'm the real victim here. He repeated those words over and over. But no one believed him anymore. Then, one day, my lawyer contacted me. Mr. James Simpson has officially filed for bankruptcy. Bankruptcy? Yes. He was unable to pay the damages owed to you. He lost his job, his finances, everything. After that, I moved forward with my new life. Through the bride's mother, I found a job as an office worker at a company. Building a life on my own was challenging, but fulfilling. For so long, I had lived for my family. But now, my life is mine to live. There were moments of loneliness. Nights when anger, sadness, and regret kept me awake. But not anymore. Now, I had people who truly supported me. People who genuinely cared about me. The future was bright, stretching endlessly ahead.